Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to this video where we're going to be building a to-do app using Angular. Alright, so here's a quick overview of what we'll be building. So it's just a basic to-do app where we have a new to-do form here. And it's not really a large form, it's a very simple form where we have a field here where we can type in the text of the to-do. So here we can type in build a to-do app and press enter, and now it adds it. And if we haven't got anything in here and click add, then we get an error saying please enter the text of your to-do. So we will be implementing form validation in this application as well. And if we go and hover over these, we get this effect where this kind of check mark fills in and it goes grey. And if we click on it, then it goes green and the text kind of fades away a little bit. So it's now in the completed state. And if we click on it again, then it will then go back to its normal state where it's unchecked. Okay, so we can change the state by clicking on the to-do, and here we have these to-do controls, and here we can edit the to-do by clicking on this, and here we have an Angular dialog using the Angular material library, and here we can change this to something else like this is a test, and press enter, and now it's changed to this is a test. Okay. So that's pretty cool. Let's go here and let's click on delete to do, and then it will delete it. And yeah, so it's a pretty cool application, and it's pretty interesting. We can go up here and we can now type in 1, and here we now see that the to do text has to be at least 2 characters. So there's multiple form validation rules. So it's the min length and required. So here it isn't actually adding the to-do because it's invalid, right? So if we change this to 1, 2, and now click add, then it'll add it. So it's 2 characters as the minimum. Let's go here and delete that. And yes, so that's what we'll be building in this tutorial. Alright, so let's get straight into it. Alright then, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a folder where I want to create the new project. And then I'm going to open a terminal in this directory. Okay, so in this directory, I'm going to run the command ng-new. This is the Angular CLI command to create a new project. And then I'm going to type in the name of the project, which will be Angular to-do app. And then I'm going to add a few flags here. The first flag is style is equal to SCSS. And that's because I want to use Sass for the styling. And I'm using the SCSS variant of Sass. Okay, and then I want to add the routing flag so that the Angular CLI automatically sets up the routing module for us. And then I'm going to add the flag -- skip tests, and then I'm going to press enter. Okay, so once that's done, I'm then going to close this, and then I'm going to open the folder here. So this folder has been created now. Angular-to-do-app. I'm going to go inside it, and then inside here I'm going to open this in code, which is the editor that I'm going to be using. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the source folder, and then I'm going to go to app, and then I'm going to go to the app.component.html. I'm now going to go to the terminal, and then I'm going to type in ng-serve to serve our application. Alright, okay, so now that's done. Now we can go to the browser, and we can go to localhost 4200, and this is the default setup we have when the Angular CLI creates the app, and all of this UI here is created in the app.component.html. So here you can see that the content below is a placeholder and can be replaced, and right at the bottom here, right after all of this placeholder markup, we see that we have this comment which says that it is the end of the placeholder content. And here we have the router outlet. So this is the only thing that really matters, this tag here. So everything above it, we can go and select and get rid of. Okay, so now we only have one line of code in app.component.html, which is this router outlet tag. Okay, let's save this now, and let's go back to our application, and we don't see anything. And that's because we have no component being shown in the router outlet. Because we haven't created any, and we haven't set up the routing module to show any routes, right? So let's go to the routing module. So here is where our routes for the application are defined, and we have an empty array as the routes constant. So here we actually have to create a new root object which contains a path that corresponds to a certain component. But first we have to create a new component. So let's go and create a new terminal. And I'm going to use the Angular CLI to generate a new component. So let's do ng generate component, and then the name of the component, which will be to-dos, and then press enter. Okay, and now we have this new folder inside the app folder called to-dos, and it contains all of the component files. So it contains the HTML, the CSS, or the Sass file, in this case the .scss file, and the component class, which is this TypeScript file. Okay, so let's now go and create the root object in the app-routing.module.ts. So inside here, let's create a root object which has a path property set to the empty path, and that's because we just want this on localhost 4200, okay? So not /test, right? Because in that case, /test would be a path with test, but in this case, we just want it to be just the empty root, okay? So we want it to be at localhost 4200. Okay, so here let's set this to the empty path, and let's set component to the new component we created, which was the to-dos component. There we go, and that's been imported up here for me automatically by the editor. So make sure you import this and set it down here. Okay, so that should be it. Let's save that and let's close this, and let's go back to the browser, and now we see to-dos works. The reason that we see this is because in the root outlet, it's loading in the to-dos component, and by default, when we created the component, the Angular CLI set the content of the to-dos component template to a paragraph tag with to-dos works. So if we change this, let's actually just get rid of that and save that. Now we don't see anything. Okay, so let's go here and let's just put h1 and let's say testing. Save that, and now we see testing. Great. So now let's start actually building this application. So first of all, let's actually install the CSS library that we'll be using, and the library that we'll be using is Bulma. So this is a free and open source CSS framework. So this is what we'll be using in this project. So let's go to the terminal and let's install Bulma like this. Okay, so let's go back to our editor. Let's go to the terminal and let's run npm install Bulma, and then add the flag -- save and press enter. Okay, so once that's finished, we can go to styles.scss, and here we can see this comment which says you can add global styles to this file and also import other style files. Okay, so this is kind of like the main style global styles file for the Angular project. So inside here we could, for example, put HTML and set the background to green, and let's see what that does. That will now set the background to green. So here we can have global styles. Okay, so let's get rid of this. And in here we can also import other style files. So in this case we can import the Bulma library files. So let's do @import, and then let's go to node modules. So /node modules /Bulma and this is the main Bulma file. So this will load in the whole of Bulma. And yeah, so let's just do that. Let's save that now, and let's go back to our application. And this should now load. Okay, and now we don't have that green background because we removed that that line of code. And also we can see that this is a new font, right? Let's actually comment out this line and save it. And let's go here, and we can see that this is what it was before. That's because this is the default styling, but then when we import Bulma, then it changes to this. Okay, and the reason that this is a smaller text and things is because here we're using h1, but in Bulma they don't actually set the styles on the tags. Instead we actually have to do a class and then add a class and explicitly set this to title. Save that, and let's go here, and now it's big. And they have a size modifier. So for example, is1 would kind of correspond to like a h1 tag. So if you save that and go here, then it's large, and if you do is, for example, is5, save that, that'd be a lot smaller. Now it's a lot smaller. Okay, so that's the class title from Bulma and the size modifier. And you can learn more about this if you go to documentation. And in this case, if we go to elements, I think it's in here, maybe we should go to text. Maybe there's a title. Yeah, oh yeah, here we go. So here we have simple headings to add depth to your page. This is what we're using. We're adding the class title to our element, and we are adding a size modifier. And you can see here sizes. There are 6 sizes available, and it goes through all of those. So that's what we're using here. Alright, so let's go back to our app, and let's go back to our code. Alright, so at this point, let's actually look at what we want to build. So I have a few screenshots here of what we want to kind of build. Let's look at the main screen. So here we have a large heading section, and here we have a new to-do section here, this box here, and it's kind of overlaid on this larger heading section here. So to do that, we'll be using negative margins. We'll get into that a bit later. And then here, down here, we have a list of the to-dos, and they're pretty simple, pretty simply styled. You just have blocks and a very light gray underline. And here we have the checkboxes. And if we actually look at a different screenshot here, I have a hover state. So if you look at the hover state here, okay, so first of all, here is the checked state. So when it's checked, then you have this check mark here, and you have a green background on the checkbox. And also you have a much lighter color being applied to the text here to kind of show that it's been completed, and it doesn't draw as much attention because it's not that important anymore because you've completed the task, right? And here we have the hover state, right? So here's the hover state. So here we can see that the checkbox has gone gray, and you can see a faint kind of subtle check mark icon being shown here. And also we have this section over here, which is the controls box, which contains 2 buttons, which is one to edit and one to delete. Okay, so that's what we want to build. Let's actually go and start building it. So let's go back to this screenshot here, and let's start building this heading section here. Alright, so let's minimize that, and let's go here, and let's get rid of this. And first of all, let's create a section tag, and let's give this the class of heading-section, and inside there let's type in h1 with a class of title, and let's set the text of this to to-dos, and that's because we have this heading section here with to-dos in there. That's what I'm creating now. So let's save that now, and let's go back to the browser, and here we can see that we have this to-dos here. So now let's go and apply some styling and try and make this look like what we have here. Okay, so let's go back to the code, and let's go to the todos.component.scss file. So these are the styles for this component. Okay, so inside here we can create a selector, or use a selector here of heading section. Okay, so the class heading section. Okay, and then inside here, first of all, let's set the background. So background, and let's set this to green. Save that, and go here, and now we can see this green section here. We will have to change this to this gradient color here, but let's first get the padding right, the size of this. So let's go here, and let's go here, and let's set the padding to 20 pixels. Let's save that, and let's go back to the application. Let's make this a bit more. Let's make this 100 pixels. Let's save that and go back to the application, and that's much better. That looks about the size of what we have here. Let's now go and set the gradient color that we have here. So let's go back to the code, and let's set the background. Instead of a color, let's set this to a linear gradient, and this is a CSS function. Let's first of all just type in 2 colors. So let's use an RGB code, and let's type in 2,228,171. Okay, and then let's do another color, RGB 74, 215, and 240. Okay, so we have a green here, and we have a blue here. Okay, so let's now save this, and let's see how this looks. Cool, alright, so that looks pretty good, but we want this to be from left to right, because right now this is from top to bottom. We see this green kind of transition into this blue, whereas in the screenshot here we have green slowly transitioning into the blue from left to right. So to achieve this in CSS, we have to just type in here at the start of this linear gradient function the direction, which is to right. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the application, and now it's from green to blue from left to right. Okay, so now it looks like we have here. Cool. All right, so now let's actually center this text and make it look more like what we have here. So first of all, I want to make this a lot larger. So let's go to the template and let's add the is1 size modifier here. Save that and let's go back to the application, and that's much larger. And I think that's the size I'm using here. All right, so now let's center this. That's pretty easy. We just have to set has text centered. Save that and let's go here, and now it's centered. Great. This is a class provided from Bulma. If you look at the documentation, I think we can even find it. Bulma has text centered. Yeah, so this is a typography helper. So if you go here we have the alignment helpers, has text centered, makes the text centered. So that's pretty useful to know. This page has quite a few helpers here. Alright, so let's go back to the application and let's now style this so that it's white. And here this also has a bit of a text shadow, which is pretty cool as well. So we can add the text shadow as well in the .scss file. So let's go here and let's actually nest in some styles here. So let's do h1.title to target the title, and let's set the font weight to bold. And let's set the color to white, and let's set a text shadow. Let's set the text shadow to 0 pixels, 1 pixels, and 2 pixels. And let's set the color here to RGBA black 0.2. Okay, so this is black with a alpha value of 0.2. Okay, let's save that now. Let's go back to the application, and now we have that nice text shadow. To make it more clear to see, we can actually make this 0.7, and you'll see this much more clearer that it's there. But it looks a lot nicer, just a subtle shadow. So I'm going to set this to 0.2, save that, and that looks pretty good. Let's just actually make this 0.12 to make this a bit more subtle. Cool. All right, so you can't really notice it, but you'll notice it if it's not there. For example, if I created a second one of these, and I said no text shadow, and I saved that, and then I went here and I did .no text shadow, and I did text shadow none, and I made this important. Let's make this important as well, and I save that, and then I go here. So here it's quite clear that this has a shadow and this one doesn't have a shadow, because it makes it a bit cleaner, I think, a bit more depth to this one here. So that's cool. Let's go back to the code here. Let's get rid of this, save that, go here, get rid of that, save that. Alright, cool. So now we have this to-do section done. If you look at the screenshot here, we have this to-dos section done, and if you look at what we have so far in the browser, it looks pretty much the same. If I actually do view actual size, there we go, then it looks pretty much the same as what we have here. So the next thing we can do is we can actually create this new to-do box. So let's do that now. Let's go back to the markup, the template here. Okay, and here let's create a div with class of add to-do box. And inside this div here, let's create a form. So let's create a form tag, and let's get rid of the action. Let's just have that form tag. And inside here, let's have h1 with the title. Actually, let's make this h2, and let's give the class of title is -5, and let's set this to new to do. Okay, and now if we go to our application, we can see that we have this new to do here. Actually, let's go back to the template here. Let's actually move this outside of this heading section. Let's paste that back here. Okay, so we want this to be outside, because currently before it was inside this section here. We want it to be outside. So if we save this and then go back here, it's now outside, okay? Because I moved it outside of the heading section. Okay, so here, now we have this. So let's create the input. So here in the UI design, we have this input here, and we have this add button. So let's go and create that. So for this, we can just use some Bulma styles. So let's create a div with the class of field, and inside here we can add a div with the class of control, and inside the control we'll have the input. Let's set the class to input, because without this, let's just leave that empty for now. Save this. If we go here, then here we see that we have this this input, which is just styled with the default styles that the browser applies to it. So to add the Bulma styles, we actually have to give the class of input. So save this, and let's go back here, and now we have a nice input which is styled by Bulma. Okay, so first of all, this is way too wide. So if we go to the screenshot here, we see that this has a maximum width and it's centered. So if we go here, and if we wrap this in a container div, so let's create a div with the class of container, and if we move the add to do box inside there, okay, so now this is wrapped inside the container. Okay, cool. So if I now save this, and let's go back to the application, we now see that we have some space on the sides here. But if you look here, here we have a much less wide sort of design. So what we can do is we can go to our style sheet for the to-dos component, and we can set some styles on the container class, and we can set the max width to 800 pixels. Save that, and let's go back to the application, and now it's only 800 pixels maximum width. Okay, so that's only going to be 800 pixels as the maximum width, and it will also then be just 100% of the width when we're smaller than 800 pixels. Okay, cool. So the next thing we can do is we can create the add button. Okay, and let's actually go to the Bulma documentation, and let's go to form. Okay, so here's the form documentation. Here we have some links. Let's go to general. So here you can see that they have the field classes, and you have the controls, which then contain the inputs and the text areas and things like that. What I want to look at is a grouped field. So if we go down here and we look for an example of what we want, which is an input which has a button next to it. Yeah, so this sort of thing here. So here they're using the has add-ons, but we don't want it to be attached to the input. We want there to be a bit of space in between it. So if you look here, we have a bit of space in between the input and the button. So if we keep on scrolling down here we can see the is grouped modifier, and here this is the perfect example of what we want. We want a field which is grouped, which has two controls, which is the input and the button, and they are slightly separated with some space here. So let's just copy this, and let's go back to our application code. In the template, we can paste this. So if we go, and let's actually get rid of this field that we've got here. Let's get rid of this, and let's just paste in what we copied. Okay, let's save this now, and let's go back to our application in the browser. And now we see we have this input here and this search button here, and that looks pretty similar to what we have here. In terms of the layout, we have the title text here, and then we have the input, and then the add button here, and that's basically what we have here. Let's just change the text of the placeholder and this search button. Let's change this to an add button. Okay, so let's go here and let's change this to add. Okay, and let's change the placeholder to what we have in the design. If we look here, we can see it says type to do text here. Okay, so if we go here and type in type to do text here, ... save that, and now let's go back to our application, and now we can see that we've changed the placeholder and it now says add. Okay, cool. So later on we'll be starting this add button so that it has this icon here and it has this nice gradient background, but for now we'll leave it as it is, like this, and let's just focus on making this white box, and let's move it slightly upwards so it's overlaid on the background of this main section here. Okay, so let's do that now. Let's go to the template, actually the styles, I think we're done on the template. Let's go to the style sheet and let's work on this. So let's use the .add to do box selector, because that's the class we used on this div here. So let's use add to do box selector, and then inside here we can do, first of all, let's just set the padding to 25 pixels. Let's save that, and let's go here, and now we see that there's a bit of padding there. We can't really see it that clearly though, so let's actually set a border 1 pixel solid blank. Save that, and now we can see that that's the box, and before we didn't have the padding, so let's just comment that out, and then we can see that here we have no space on the edges. So let's add some padding so that there's some space, and this is important because soon we're going to be moving this upwards and we are going to give it a white background, so we need this space here. Okay, so if we set the padding to 25 pixels, let's keep the border for now, and let's actually give this a border radius, because right now if we just quickly go to here, here we see that it's very boxy. It has these sharp edges. So the way that we can fix that is by giving it a border radius, like we have in the design. We have these smooth edges, these rounded edges. So if we set the border radius to 4 pixels, save that, now they should be rounded like that. Awesome. The next thing we can do is we can actually move this upwards. So to do that, we'll be using negative margins. So let's go to the style sheet and let's give this a negative margin. So margin top, and let's just say minus 20 pixels. Okay, save that, and let's go back here. And now we can see that it's actually moved up 20 pixels and it's overlaid onto this section here. Cool, so that's what we want. But let's actually make the background white. So let's go here, let's give the background of white, save that, and let's go back here, and now it's white. Cool. So now we can get rid of this border because we don't need it anymore. Save that, let's go here, and now we can see that it's white and it still has the border radius and everything like that. So that's cool. Let's now actually set a box shadow so that we can actually see the difference between this box here and the white background here. So let's give it a box shadow of 0. So that's 0 movement in the left and right, and then 4 pixels, which will move it down 4 pixels, and 12 pixels, which is the blur. And then we want to set the color as RGBA black, and then let's set this to 0.2. Let's save that, and let's go here. We now have this box shadow here, and if we look at the design, the one we have here is slightly more subtle. So let's just change this a little bit. If we go back to the styling, let's just change this to 0.08. Okay, let's save that, and let's go back to the application, and now that's a bit more subtle. Great. So next we can actually move this up a little bit more. So here we can see that this is pretty much in the middle. It's here, right? So it's moved up about half of its height. So if we look here and look at what it's like in the inspect element, here we can see that the total height is 136 pixels. So that's about 68 pixels is half of that, right? So let's go and move it upwards minus 68. Let's go here, and let's go minus 68 pixels. Let's save this, and let's go back to the application. And now it's pretty much like we have here. It's in the middle, it's intersecting at these two colors here of this heading section and the white of the background. Okay, cool. So that's pretty cool, but now we're losing a lot of space down here because we've moved this up. So here there's a lot more space up here than there is down here. So what we can do is we can actually increase the padding bottom of this heading section. So if we go to the style sheet and let's go all the way up to the heading section, and let's go to the padding. All right, so let's just go here and let's add padding bottom 150 pixels. Okay, so this will set all of the sides of the padding to 100 pixels. And then when it gets to this line here, it will then just set the padding at the bottom to 150. Okay, so let's save that now, and let's go back to the application. And now we have a lot more space down here. Great. So that's looking pretty cool. Let's see what we can do next. So if we go to the design. Okay, cool. So let's work on this add button. Okay, so first of all, we have to actually get this icon. And the way that we're going to get this icon is by using material icons. So if we go here and we can search for material icons, and here we get this first link here. So here we have this icon library provided by Google, which is material icons. And here we can see that we can use this icon font in our web projects. So if we go to the developer guide, and let's go to icon fonts for the web, that's what we want. And if we go to this setup method number 1, which is using via Google Web Fonts, that's what we want. Let's just copy this, and let's go back to our application, and let's go to the index.html file, and let's import that there. So let's just paste this in. Okay, so here we have this link here that I copied from here. Okay, let's save that now, and let's close this, and let's go to the template here, and let's go to the add button. And first of all, let's actually change this from an A tag to a button tag, because this won't be a link, it'll be a button which we can listen to the click events and then do something on the click event. Okay, so let's change that, and then let's get rid of the is_info. We don't need this. Okay, so let's save that. Let's go back to application, and because we removed the is_info, it's now like this. So that's okay. That's all good. We'll be styling the background and everything like that soon. And now let's add that icon, right? So let's do i.material-icons. So that's how you use the material icon library. You use an I tag with the class of material icons, and then here we can actually type in the name of the icon we want. So if we actually go back here and go back here to the material icons main page here, we can actually search for some icons. So the one that we want is an add icon, and if you go here, we can see that it has the add icon here. So that's what we want, and we just have to use the name that it says here, right? So just type in add in here, and it should work. So if we save this now, and we go back to our application, we now see this add icon. Awesome. So that's exactly what we want. Let's now style this button. So let's go and do that now. Let's go to our code, and let's actually add a class to this button. So let's create a new class called alt gradient button. Okay, so that's the name of the class I'm going to use. Okay, so let's save this, and let's now go to styles.scss. And the reason I'm going to styles.scss and not the todos component.scss is because I want this to be a global style that we can use in all of our components, because the styles in this file are scoped only to this component, to the todos component. Okay, so let's go to styles.scss, and here we can create some global styles for the alt gradient button class. Okay, so first of all, let's just set the background to green, just see if it's working. So let's go back here, and now it's green. Great. Let's set the border to none, because I can still see that border. So let's just get rid of that border, and now there's no border. Awesome. Let's get rid of this background now. Okay. Cool. All right. So let's now set the background. Okay. So let's go and look at the UI design here. So here we can see that this is a gradient between a pink and a orange, right? So that's creating a nice effect there. So let's go and create that. Let's go back to our style sheet, and let's set the background to a linear gradient, and let's set the direction as to right, and let's set the color to RGBA. Sorry, just RGB, and then let's type in 236.72.140 as the first color, and then the second color will be RGB 240.5482. Okay, save that, and let's go to the application, and there we go. So now we have this color here. Awesome. The next thing we can do is we can change the color of the text here to white. So let's go back to the styles, and here let's set color to white. Save that, go back to the application, and now it's white. Awesome. So now it looks quite similar to what we have here, but let's actually also set the font weight, because here we can see that it's a little bit heavier than what we have here. So to fix that, we can go back here and set the font weight to 600. Okay, so that's a semi-bold font weight. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the application. And once it's reloaded, we can see that it's a lot bolder. Awesome. Cool. All right, so the next thing we can do is we can decrease the opacity by default, and when you hover over it, you then have the full opacity to create a nice hover effect. So let's go here and let's target the hover state. So let's do and hover, and let's set the opacity here to 1, and by default let's just set this to 0.5 just to see if it's working. We will actually increase this quite a bit, but let's go here, and once it's reloaded we can see that it's very transparent now, and then when we hover over it we can then get the full opacity like that. Okay, let's change this. Let's actually first of all change this so that the text color stays as white. So let's just change the color here to white, save that, and let's go here, and now it stays as white. That's cool. Now let's just change the default opacity, because that's way too transparent. Let's go back to the styles and let's set this to about 0.7, save that. Okay, that still doesn't look too good. All right, so let's actually increase this a little bit more. Let's go back here, change this to 0.92. I think that'll look pretty good. Let's save that and go back here. And there we go. It's very subtle, but you can kind of feel that it is changing. So that's what I want, just kind of a subtle indicator that we are hovering over it. But we do want a bit more changing to inform the user that they're hovering over the button. So let's create a sort of border effect, but let's not use border, let's use a box shadow. So let's go back here and let's use a box shadow here, box dash shadow, and let's not put any offsets, so 0 pixels for all the offsets and 0 pixels here for the blur. Okay, so no blur, and let's just set the color. First let's set the spread. So let's set the spread as 10 pixels, which is far too much, but we'll decrease that later. And let's set the color here to RGBA black 0.2. Okay, let's save that and let's go here. Okay, and now let's hover over it. And there we go. So now we have this very large border kind of effect, but we're using the box shadow and not the border effect property, I mean. So that's good. Let's actually decrease the spread here. Let's decrease this to 2 pixels and let's see how that looks. Okay, so that's 2 pixels. I don't think that's enough, so let's actually increase this to 4 pixels and save that. And there we go. So that looks pretty cool. And now let's decrease the color here. So let's go and let's set the color to 0.12. Let's see how that looks. So that's pretty cool. And I think we could leave it like that, but I'm going to actually decrease it a bit more because I want it to be a bit more subtle. So let's just change this to 0.05 and save that. And I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty subtle, but it's still noticeable. And I think it's pretty cool. Cool. All right, so the next thing we can do is we can add some spacing in between this add icon and the add text. So let's just go back to our code and let's go here and let's use the selector i.material-icons to target that icon there. And let's first of all, let's just change the color to green just to see if we can target it properly. So let's save that, go here, and it's now gone green. Great, so now that selector is working. We know that selector works. So let's go here and let's just let's add some spacing. So we want some spacing on the right hand side of this icon, right? So if we go back to the code here and we do margin-right, and let's just give it 10 pixels and see how that looks. Let's save that, go back to the application. Okay, so it's no longer green because we removed that line of code, and we've added 10 pixels of margin to the right. Cool, so that does look a lot better. But let's just decrease that a little bit because I think that's a bit too much. So maybe 7 pixels. Save that, go back to the application. Okay, cool. So I think that looks pretty cool. One thing I also want to do is I want to decrease the space on the left hand side, because it looks like there's more space on the left than there is on the right. In reality, there isn't actually more space on the left. It's just that visually it looks like there's more space on the left, just because of the way this add icon looks, right? So I think if we just put some negative margin on the left hand side, I think it will look nicer. So if we go back to the code here and we just do margin left, and then we can give this a negative margin. So negative 5 pixels. Let's try that. Save that, and let's go back to the application. Okay, and now we can see that there's less space on the left hand side. Cool. All right, so that looks pretty good. But I think that's a bit too much. I think there should be a little bit more. So maybe if we do -3 pixels and save that, go back. And now, okay, cool. So now there is a little bit more space there. And I think that looks a bit more balanced. Cool. All right, so I think that looks pretty cool. I guess we could leave it like this. But I think maybe we can actually slightly decrease the margin right, maybe to 5 pixels. Save that, go back. And let's see. Cool. All right, so I think that looks pretty balanced. I think I like this button now. Okay, cool. So let's now go on to the next thing. And I think we can work on the click styles. So if we go here, and if we, I think we can go up here and do and active. So that's when we are clicking on the button. And let's just set, let's set the opacity to maybe 0.8. Let's save that, go back. Okay, and let's click on the button. And there we go. So now it's gone to 80% opacity. Cool. All right. And this is the focus styles, by the way. So when you click on it and then drag away while you're still clicking, then it'll get the focus styles. And also when you tab, so if you are like focused here and then you tab, then it will then be focused on the button. And here we can see that we have the default styling from Bulma, which is this blue kind of border, which is actually a box shadow. So this blue box shadow that we have here, and the text goes dark, which isn't too bad. I guess we could leave it like that actually. I was thinking we could maybe change the color to white, but it's not too bad like that actually. All right, so let's leave that. Actually, I'm not too sure because I think it should still be white text. So let's just go here and let's just also work on the focus styles. And I think we can just change the color to white and then that's it really. So save that and let's go back to the application. Cool. I think that blue box shadow is enough sort of indication that it's focused. I don't think we need anything else. Cool. All right, that seems pretty good. So I think that's it. Let's go back to our code and let's just look here. So we have the hover styles, we have the active styles when we're clicking, and we have the focus styles. Cool. All right. So one thing we could maybe do is just to maybe make it a bit more obvious that we are focused. Maybe we can actually set the opacity to 1, kind of like when we're hovering over it. So maybe if we just copy this maybe and paste that there, save that. Maybe that'll look a bit nicer. Okay, cool. So when someone's focused, they can really see the difference between the normal state and the focus state. Cool. All right, so let's not spend too much time on this. I think that's done now. If we look at the design and we look at the view full size, view actual size, then we can see that it's the same, right? So we have successfully implemented that design. So I think this is basically done. This block here, that looks pretty good. Let's now move on to this list of to-dos. So let's work on that now. Okay, cool. So let's go back to our code and let's go to the template for the to-dos component. And let's go here. And here, let's create a new section with the class of section. And inside this section, let's create a container, .container. And now let's create a div which has the class of to-dos -list. And inside here, we want to do items. So here we can see that we have these to-do items here, right? So these blocks are divs with the class of to-do item. And it will contain the checkbox, and it will contain the text, and it will also contain this little box here, which shows up when you hover over it, which is what I'm calling the controls box. So these are the to-do controls, which is the edit button and the delete button. Okay, so let's create this to-do item. So .todo item, we'll create a div with the class of to-do item, and inside here, let's create that checkbox. So let's create a div with a class of check-box, and inside there we want a icon. So i.material icons, and then let's type in check. Okay, because if we actually go to the material icons page and type in check, we can see that where is it? Here it is, check. That's the one that we want. I also saw that there was one called done, and that's probably the same thing, but I'm using check. I think it is basically the same thing, but I'm going to be using check. So if I go back to the code, and I save this, and let's go back to the application, we now see this check icon here. Great. Let's now go back to the code, and here, let's now type in .todo-text. Okay, so that's outside of the checkbox. So we have the to-do item div, and it has this checkbox div, and then straight after it, I have this to-do text div. Okay, so inside here, we just simply want to put in the to-do text. So I guess I'll just put here, this is a placeholder for the to-do text. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the application. And now we see that we have this text here. Awesome. So let's now style this so it looks more like what we have in the design here. Okay, so we want the checkbox to be circular, and when we hover over it, we want to have this grey background, and when it's selected, we'll make the checkbox green, and we'll style how this layout is so that we have one next to the other and not one on top of each other. Okay, so let's go and do that now. Let's go to the code and let's go to the style sheet. So if we go to the to-dos component.scss and we go down here, we can now style the to-dos list. And this is the top level div that we have here, this to-dos list, which contains all of the to-do items. I'm actually not too sure if we need to style anything on this at the moment. So let's actually not do that right now. Let's go back here and let's just style the to-do item, to-do-item. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the UI design here. So first of all, we want to show them next to each other. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use display flex, and by default, the flex direction is set to row. So flex direction by default is set to row, and that's exactly what we want. So if we save this and go back here, we now see that it's like this. Great. And because it's the default, we don't actually need to put this here, so we can just get rid of this, save that, go back, and we see that it's still the same. That's great. So if we go back to the code here, and let's now work on the font size. So the font size is going to be 18 pixels. Let's just set the font size here to 18 pixels, save that, and let's go back to the application, and now we have this much larger text here. Great. Okay, let's see what we have to do now. Let's just work on the styling of the checkbox, I think. I think that's basically what we need to do. So let's go back to the style sheet here, and let's work on the to-do item .checkbox. Okay, so we could nest this inside here by just doing .checkbox like that, and you can see here that it will target elements which have the class of checkbox, who have a parent of to-do item, as it says here, and this is exactly the same thing, right? Exactly the same thing, but I prefer to not do too much nesting because sometimes it can get kind of messy. So I'm just going to create a new sort of selector here, like that, and here let's set the border. So here we can see in the UI design that we have on the unselected state and the unhovered state. On the normal state, here we have just a thin, well, it's not that thin, it's about a 2 pixel grey border. So if we go back here and we set the border to 2 pixels solid, and then I think the grey color I used was #EEE. So if I save that and I go back to the application, so now we can see that we have that border, but we have to actually make it circular. So if we go back to the style sheet, we can give this a circular border by doing border radius and then do 50%. Save that. And now it's circular. But now the problem is that it's not a circle, it's like an oval, right? That's because the width and height don't match. So let's go and set the width and height explicitly here to give this a circle shape. Height 28 pixels and width 28 pixels. Save that. And now it's a circle. Great. So that looks pretty good. If we look here, in the completed state and in the hover state, we can see that the checkbox, the check mark icon isn't actually that size. It's quite a bit smaller, so there's kind of like a padding around it. We aren't actually using padding here. We are just changing the font size of the check mark icon. So if we go here and we target the material icon inside the checkbox, and we just set the font size to a bit smaller. So by default it's 24 pixels, but I think we can set this to 20 pixels and save this, and let's go back here. And now we see that it's a lot smaller. So that's good, but it's not centered. So if we go back to the style sheet, okay, so first of all, let's just go here and let's make this display flex. Let's save that and let's go back to the application. Okay, cool, so that hasn't changed anything yet. Let's just go back here and let's go to the i.material icons here and let's use margin auto to center it. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to the application, and now we can see that it's centered. Great. Cool, alright, so now let's now hide it and only show it when we hover over it. So let's go and do that. Because when you look at the UI design here, it isn't actually here when it's in the normal state. Only when you hover over it and when it's selected, we see it. So let's go back to our code here and let's set the opacity to 0. Okay, so hide by default. Okay, let's save that and let's now go back to the application, and now we can't see it. Great. One thing I want to quickly do is just set some margin right on this checkbox because it's very connected to this. So I want some space in between the checkbox and the text, like we see in the UI design here. So let's add some space in between the checkbox and the text by adding some right margin to not here, but the checkbox itself, the checkbox element. So if I set margin right to 20 pixels, that should be okay. So let's save that and let's go back to the application, and now we have a lot of space in between those two. Great. So that looks good. Let's also go here and yeah, so I'm hiding by default, that's good. So let's now work on the hover effect. So the way that we're going to do this is we don't want to actually set it on the hover effect of the checkbox, because then it will only be when we hover over the checkbox. So for example, if we did this, then it would be something like this. On the checkbox hover here, then we would set the opacity to 1. But if we do this, then when we hover over the text, then this won't show, only when we hover over the checkbox. And that's actually not working, so that's pretty funny. If we go here, let's see what's going on. And hover, oh yes, sorry, it has to be i.material icons. Material icons. Okay, so if we do that, save that, now it should work. So now we see it when we hover over the checkbox, but we don't see it when we hover over the text. And we kind of want this this block here to be all one to-do item. So when we hover over any part of the to-do item, I want the checkbox to be in the hovered state. So to do that, we can go back here and remove this. Let's not do this. Let's instead create a new CSS rule here, selecting the to-do-item in the hover state, okay, and then selecting the checkbox inside the to-do item, okay. So if we go here, we can actually see that this is the scenario. So we have the element which has the class of to-do item and it's in the hovered state, and then we are targeting the element which has the checkbox class, which is great for us because it means that we can just now target the material icon, and inside here we can do opacity is equal to 1. Okay, let's save this and let's go back to the application, And now let's hover over the text here. Okay, and that's not working. Why is that? Let's go back here and let's see. Oh yeah, okay, so this has to be material icons. Okay, save that and let's go back here. Cool, all right, so now it works. Awesome. Okay, so now let's go back to the code. And one thing I also want to do is change the background of this checkbox, because if you look at the design here, we can see here that in the hovered state, it's this gray background. And it's actually the same color as the border color. So the border color normally is the hashtag EEE, and we are going to set the background here to the same color so that it looks all the same, you know. So hashtag EEE, save that. Let's go back to the application and let's hover over it. And now we get that gray background. Awesome. Cool. All right, so that looks pretty good. And it looks pretty similar to what we have here, except it's a lot darker, right? This check icon is a lot darker than we have here. So let's work on that. Let's go back to our code. Let's change the opacity here to 0.28. Okay, and let's save that. And let's go back here. So now let's hover over it. Cool. All right. So now the checkmark icon is a much lower opacity than it was before, and it's more subtle. So that's much better. And it looks very similar to what we have here. Cool. All right. The next thing we can do is, I guess we could add a transition. So let's work on that transition. Let's go back to our code. And let's go to this section of code here. When we are targeting the icon in the to-do item .checkbox here. Okay, so let's go down here. And let's set a transition. So transition. And let's set a transition on the opacity. Let's set 0.2 seconds. Let's save that and let's go back to the application and let's hover over this. Okay, so now there is a transition on the check mark icon. Okay, but let's add a transition to the background of the checkbox itself. So to do that, let's go up here so that we are just inside the checkbox styles. So the checkbox itself. And let's set a transition here of background color 0.2 seconds. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the application. And there we go. So now it's all transitioning at the same time, and that looks pretty good. Cool. All right. So let's now see how this looks when we have a lot of text. Let's go back to the template and let's just get rid of this. And let's just put in a lot of text. So I'm just going to put in a string of lorem ipsum. Save that. And let's go back to the application. And now here we have a lot of text. And a few things have happened. So first of all, this looks very squashed. Okay, so that we have to fix. And also it's top aligned. And in the design here, we want it to be center aligned. So, okay, so let's just first of all try and fix this issue with this being squashed. The reason this is happening is because we're using Flexbox, and by default on this element, it's actually shrinking it. So this is the wrong style sheet. Let's go here. So here, if we go to the to-do item checkbox, and we go here and do flex-shrink 0 and save this, this should hopefully fix the problem. Okay, so now that's fixed the problem. It's now a circle. Cool. Let's now fix the second issue, which was we want this to be center aligned here. So if we go back to the styles here, and we go up here to the to-do item class, and we do align items, align-items center. Okay, save that. Let's go back to the application, and now it's center aligned. Awesome. Okay, cool. So that's looking pretty good. Let's go back here and let's see what else we can do. Let's just create one other to-do item which has just one line of text. So if we go here and we can just copy and paste this to-do item div, and let's just set this to this only has one line of text, just so we can make sure that the styling is consistent. Okay, so we found a problem already, which is we need a lot more spacing in between these items. And I've just realized that we also need this subtle little line here in between each of the to-do items. So let's go and do that now. First of all, let's set the spacing. So if we go back to the code and we go to the style sheet, let's go to the to-do item class and let's set the padding. So if we set the padding to 20 pixels and save that, let's go back to the application. Now we have 20 pixels of padding. One thing that could be pretty useful is if, for now, if we just set the background to something like hashtag EEE, just so we can actually see these blocks. Okay, so that didn't help that much actually because they're the same color. But let's just set a margin bottom for now to 20 pixels just so we can see the individual to-do items. Okay, so that's more useful now. So here we can now see that we have set the 20 pixels of padding, and that's what it's done. We have 20 pixels here, 20 pixels here, and all around. So let's just improve this a little bit. Let's just add a bit more padding to the top and bottom, and a bit less to the sides. Actually, I think the sides might be okay at 20 pixels. Let's just quickly go to the padding here, and let's set 0, 20 pixels. Save that, and let's go back here. Okay, so now here we can see what's happened, which is the top and bottom padding has been set to 0, and the left and right has been set to 20 pixels. So this shorthand here is saying that the top and bottom is 0, and the left and right is 20 pixels. So this is pretty useful, and we're just going to try and adjust these so that we get a nice configuration of the padding on the left, right, and the top and bottom. So I think let's just set this to 35 pixels and 15 pixels. Save that, and let's go back here. Okay, and that looks pretty good. I think that looks pretty good. Let's now go back here, and let's get rid of the background and the margin bottom. Save that, go back here. And let's actually set the border bottom, because that's pretty important. If we set the border to 1 pixels solid hashtag EEE, save that, let's go back here. And now we have this line here in between each of the to-do items. Okay. Let's actually make this a bit more subtle. Let's change this color to F2, F3, F5, which is a very, very light gray, which has a kind of hint of blue in it. Okay, so let's save that, and let's go back to the application. Cool. All right, so that should be how it is in the UI design as well. Okay. All right. Okay. So now let's make this look clickable. Okay. So let's go to the style sheet, and let's go to the to-do item, and here let's set the cursor to pointer. Save that, and let's go back to the application. And now these look clickable. Great. Okay. Cool. So the next thing we can do is we could probably work on the completed state. So let's do that. Let's go back to the code, and let's go to the template, because the completed state will be based on the fact of whether or not there is the completed class on the to-do item. So if we go here and we say to-do item completed and save that, and then we go back to the application, there's no difference because we haven't actually styled the completed class. So if we go back to the style sheet and we go down here, and first of all, let's look at the design here. So when a to-do item is completed, the text has gone gray. So let's style that here. So let's go to-do item and dot completed. So when that element has the class of to-do item and completed, then we will set the color to hashtag AAA. Okay, let's go back to the application. Okay, and now that has a gray text color. Great. Let's now work on the checkbox. So let's scroll down here. And we could nest the styles here, but I'm actually going to create a new selector down here to prevent this getting too messy. So let's do to-do item completed dot completed dot checkbox. Okay, so when it's completed, then we want to set the background to RGB 11 223 170. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the application. And now we can see that it's this green color. Cool. So the next thing we can do is we can actually show this this check icon. So let's go back to the styles here, and let's go here and let's select the material icons class, and let's set the opacity to 1. Okay, save that, and let's go here, and now here we can see that we have that check icon. However, it's a gray color. The reason for that is because we set the text color on the to-do item completed to this gray color. So to fix that, let's just go back to the code here, and we could here set the color to black. We could do that, and go back here, and we could do that there. However, I want to move this statement to the regular state. If we go to do item dot checkbox and then go here, so just by default I want it to be a certain color. I want it to be hashtag 333. So let's save that, and let's go back to the application, and there we go. So now it is that hashtag 333 color. One small thing we have to fix is the color of the border, which has still remained gray. So if we go down here and we just set the border dash color, and let's just copy and paste this color here and save that, and let's go back to the application, and now it looks much better. Okay, cool. So it looks pretty much the same as we have here, which is good. Cool. All right, so the next thing we can do is we can work on this to-dos control box, which will only show when we're hovered over the to-do item. All right, so let's go to the code here, and let's go to the template, because we're going to we are going to need to create a new div for the to-dos control box. So let's go inside the to-do item here, and let's create a new div inside here with the class of to-do controls box. Okay, and then inside here we want to create the two buttons that we see here. So if you look here, this one is the edit button and this one is the delete button. So let's create these two buttons. Let's go back to the template, and let's create a div with the class of to-do control button, and this will have an icon, and it will be the edit icon. Let's save that, and let's go back to our application, and here we see that we have the edit icon showing up there. So that's good. We will be styling this in a minute. So let's go and create the other to-do control button, which is the delete button. So let's just type in delete as the icon. Let's save that, and let's go back to the application, and now we have these two icons showing there. Cool. So let's now style it so that it's over here and styled like this instead of how it is now. So let's go to the style sheet and let's work on this. So first of all, let's style the to-do controls control box. So here, let's select to-do controls box, and let's actually add the to-do dash item parent selector so that it's only selecting the to-do controls box when it's inside another element which has the class of to-do item. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is we want to place the to-dos control box in the bottom left of the to-do item. So let's go and do that. We are going to be using position absolute for this. Okay, so that we have control over where it's positioned. And we're going to set the bottom to 0, and we're going to set right to 0. Okay, and let's save that now, and let's go back to the application. And now we can see that it's in the bottom right. Great, so that's pretty good. Cool, alright, so let's go back to the style sheet, and when we look at the design, we can actually see that it's slightly off from the edge. So we could maybe set this slightly off the edge by doing right 5 pixels. Saving that. So it's slightly moved in. Okay, and let's now set this to display flex so that they aren't stacked one on top of the other, but they are next to each other. So let's go back here, let's save this and go back, and now they're like that. Awesome. And we can now start working on the individual buttons. So dot to do controls box, and then dot to do control button. I think that's what I called it. Let's go back here and just check. Yeah, okay, so let's go back here, and yes, that's correct. So then let's just confirm that by changing the background to green. Let's see if that changes it. Yeah, okay, so now they're green. Awesome. Alright, so let's actually change this to this color here. So let's change this to hashtag EEE. Let's save that. And let's go back here. And that's actually a bit too dark. So let's go and change this to hashtag F5, F7, F8. Save that. And that's much better. Alright, so now let's actually go and add some padding. So let's add 7 pixels on the top and bottom, and let's add 20 pixels on the left and right. Let's save that. Let's go back here. Alright, so here we have 20 pixels on the left and right, and 7 pixels on the top and bottom. Let's actually reduce the left and right to 10 pixels. Let's save that, go back here. Okay, and let's now go and change the size of the icons. So if I go here, and I can then nest in the styles for the material icons and set the font size to 20 pixels. Okay, cool, so that's about the size we have here. That's good. Let's also set display flex. Have I set display flex on the to-do control button? Let's set display flex here and save that. Alright, cool, so that looks a lot better. The reason I did that was because before, when we didn't have this flex, it was too high up there. I'm not too sure why that is, but when we set it to flex, it then fixed that issue. So here, when it's flex, not here, not on this tag, but on the to-do control, if we set display flex here, then it fixes the issue, okay? So if we go back here and uncomment this, save that, go back, okay, cool, so that's good. The next thing we can do is we can add curved edges to this side here and this side here. If we just zoom in, so here and here we want some curved edges like in the design. Here we can see that there's some slightly curved edges here. So let's go and do that. Let's go to the style sheet and let's add some border radius here. Let's add border dash radius of 10 pixels. Let's save that and let's go back to the application. Okay, let's just zoom out a little bit here. Okay, and that's far too much. It's too rounded actually. So let's go back and let's change that to about 7 pixels. Okay, so that's slightly better. But now we have this problem of all of the edges are rounded, okay? And we only want this edge here and this edge here to be rounded. So the way that we have to do this is we have to add the border radius to just the top left border of this edit button and the top right border of this delete button. So the way that we can do this in a kind of like scalable way is by just targeting the first and last of the type, right? So here we can go and do and colon first of type, and here we can see it's the same as the nth of type 1, and it represents an element that is the first sibling of its type in the list of children of its parent element. So it's just the first element in that grouping of the parent element. So that should just target the left one here because it's the first in the template, right? Here, when we go to the markup, we see that this is the first element in its parent. So it's targeting just this. So here we could set the background to green just to show you that it's just targeting that left one. Save that, go back here, and here we see it's just targeting this left one. And if we go back here, and let's also target the last of type, and let's give this a background of blue. Okay, let's go back to the application, and now here we can see that we have the green and the blue. Okay, so that's working. So let's now change this. Let's get rid of the border radius here. We don't need that. So for the first of type, this will be the left hand side. So then on the left hand side, we want the border radius on the top left. So let's just do the border dash top left radius, and let's give this a value of 7 pixels. Let's save that now, and let's go back to the application. And now it's kind of hard to see, but it is now just rounded on the top left border. That's good. And let's go back and do the same thing for the last of type. But here we want this to be top right radius. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the application. And now that's exactly what we want, because it's now just rounded on the top left and the top right there. Cool. And one cool thing about this is we could have targeted just this button and just this button and then put the styles on those two there. But now that we're using the selectors first of type and last of type, it means that we can, in the future, potentially have more of these buttons. So let's just create a few more here, and let's just give this another value. So note, and let's change this one to face. That's one other icon. So let's just create those two random buttons there. So here we can now see that we have these new two new ones here, and they have no border radius. And it creates this cool effect because we only have the border radius on the top left here and the top right here, so it looks all as one grouping. So that's pretty cool. Let's get rid of those now. We don't need those. So that we just have these two here. Save that, go back, and there we go. All right, so the next thing we can do is, if we look at the design, there isn't much more to implement here in terms of the design, but we can actually implement the hover effect. So let's go and do that now. Let's go back to the code, and let's go to the style sheet, and let's implement the hover effect of these to-do control buttons. So if I go here and I target the hover state, here we can just change the background to #EEE. Let's save that. Let's go back to the application. And now it changes color when we hover over the to-do control buttons. Alright, cool. So let's now go and create the click effect. So let's go and target the active state. And on click, we want the background color to change. So let's just change this to E5, E7, E8. So just slightly darker than the EE. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the application and let's try and click on these. Okay, so it's going slightly darker on click. Cool, alright. That looks good. So I think the next thing we can do is I want to actually make the delete button have a click effect that is slightly tinted with red to show that it's a dangerous action. Okay, so let's go and do that now. Let's see how we'll do that. Let's go to the template and let's actually add a new class here. Let's say is danger. Okay, and this is a class provided by Bulma for the buttons, but in this case it won't do anything in our application because we aren't using the style for the button. Here we aren't using the class for the button, so this won't do anything. If we get rid of this and save this, we can see that it looks exactly the same and there's no change. So I'm just using this class name as it's pretty simple to understand, and it's going to be consistent with the other class names because we're using Bulma. But we can go here and we can just style the isDanger class. So if we go here and we go to here and we just copy this, use the same exact selector, except we just go here and do .isDanger, and then here we can actually just do the active state right here. And here we can do the background color as RGB 1552727. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the application. And then when we click on this delete button, then it goes red. So that's a pretty dark red. Okay, so maybe we don't want it to be that dark. Maybe we can actually, or instead, let's instead not do it on the entire button, but let's just try and color the icon. So i.material icons, and let's not do the background, but let's now do the color. Okay, let's save that now. Let's go back to the application and let's try it now. Okay, there we go. So now it's got that red color. Okay, cool. So I think that's it. I think we've styled this pretty nicely. One thing we could do is we could just change the color of the material icons, just so it's consistent with what we've done before, because I think we've used this color before up here. So let's just use 333 and save that, and let's go back to the application. Okay, and there we go. Okay, but that's a bit too dark actually. So maybe let's make that 333 on hover. Let's just cut that and let's go to the hover selector here, and let's just target i.material icons, and let's just paste that in right there. Okay, and here I think we can just change this to a 555. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to the application. Okay, so now it's a lot lighter, and then it only gets darker when we hover over it. Great. Cool. All right. So the next thing we can do is we can try and make it so that this only shows on hover, because in our designs here, this is only showed when we are hovering over the to-do item. As we can see here, it isn't showing up here or here, but it's showing up on the hovered state of the to-do item. Okay, so let's go back to the code and let's try and implement that. So let's go to the to-do item .to-do controls box selector here, and let's by default or hide by default, let's just do a hide by default comment, and let's set the opacity to 0, and let's also give us a visibility of hidden, and let's go back to the application and see how this looks. Okay, so now it's not showing up at all. Great. Let's go back here and let's now show it when we hover over it. So let's go and create a new selector here. .to-do item hover, .to-do controls box. Okay, and then here we can set the opacity to 1 and the visibility to visible. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the application. Cool, so now it's showing up on hover. Cool, alright. So now the next thing we can do is we can make this fade in. So the way that we can do this is by using a CSS transition. So let's go here and let's add a transition. And let's put the opacity transition as 0.2 seconds. I think we also need to transition the visibility, but let's try it without and let's see how this goes. So let's save that and let's go back to the application. And now it's fading in, and then it isn't fading out when we leave the to-do item. I think that's because we have to actually transition the visibility. So let's put 0.2 seconds as the visibility. Let's save that and let's go back to the application. And now it's fading in and out. Cool. So that's pretty cool. One thing that we could also do is we could put a slight transition delay on the hover effect so that this shows up slightly after the main transition of the checkbox hover. Because right now it's kind of taking a lot of the attention when I think most of the attention should be to this checkbox. So I think if we add a slight delay, that might be pretty cool. So if we go here and we add a, actually let's go to the hover state and then do the transition delay. So let's go transition delay and let's put this as 1 second. Let's save that and let's go back to the application. And now it's showing up after 1 second after we've hovered over the to-do item. Cool. Cool. Cool, so I think that's pretty cool. Let's go back here and let's actually decrease the delay to about 0.4 seconds. And let's save that and let's see how that looks. Alright, so I think that's pretty cool. Alright, so the next thing we can do is we can make this a little bit more interesting and make it actually shift up a few pixels when it animates in and out. So let's do that using a transform. So let's go here and let's do a transform translates y, and let's type in 10 pixels. Okay, and let's go here and let's also add it to the transition. So transform 0.2 seconds. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the application. Oh, okay, so that's not transitioning because I didn't put transform translate y0 here. So transform translate y0. Okay, save that and let's go back to the application. And now it's fading in and up, right? So it's going, so it's fading up and fading in at the same time. Cool. All right, let's actually decrease the amount that it's moving. 10 pixels is a bit too much. So I think if we add this, change this to 2 pixels, then I think it should look pretty cool. Cool, so it's very subtle and it looks pretty cool, I think. All right, cool. So let's now go back to the code and let's go to the template and let's actually add this onto, let's add the to-do controls box onto the first to-do up here that we've got, the one that's in the checked state, in the completed state. So if we just copy the controls box markup and we go up here and paste it in here, save that and let's go back to the application. Then when we hover over this one, it should show up. Alright, so when we're hovering over this one here, it is showing up, but it's showing up all the way down there. The reason it's happening like that is because of the positioning. We are positioning it as absolute. When using position absolute, it is positioned relative to the nearest parent element, which has position relative. And in this case, the to-do item divs haven't been set to position relative. And it's actually the container element, which we have, if we inspect element, we have this container here. This container is position relative, and that's why it's, see here, and that's why the to-do controls box is being positioned in the correct position relative to this one here, and that's because it's at the end of the container. So it looks like it's working here, but it's really just being positioned relative to the container. So let's fix that. Let's go back to the code and let's add position relative to the to-do item. So if we go up to the to-do item selector here and we add position relative and save that, then now it should be fixed. Let's go here and hover over this item here. Cool, alright, so now it's working. Nice. Okay, cool, so that's looking good. The next thing we can do is we can start working on the actual functionality of the application, because currently this application isn't doing anything, it's just UI, right? So we've pretty much finished with the UI, so now we can actually start working on the functionality. Alright, so the first thing we can do is we can go back to the code and we can go to the terminal and let's create a service which handles the data. So let's use the Angular CLI, ng generate service, and let's call this a data service. So let's just call this data, press enter, and this will generate a data service. So if we go and search for the data service, it's here. Alright, so first of all, let's create a property to contain the to-dos. But before I do that, actually, well, let's actually create the property first. So let's call this to-dos, and let's make this an array of any. And the reason I'm doing that is because this should actually be a custom type, because if we go to the UI here, we have quite a few properties on this object. We have the checked state, and we have the text, and that actually might be it. So it's actually pretty simple, but we will still want to create a type for it. So let's go and create that type. Let's go and go into the app folder, and let's create a new folder, and let's call this shared. And in here, it will contain the services and the models. So let's actually move the data service into shared. Yep, let's move that there. we may need to update the app.module. So let's just go and check that. Oh no, it's because it's a service, so it's not actually in the module. Yeah, alright, so let's go back here. So that's fine. Let's save that. And let's go to the shared folder and let's create a new file. And let's call this todo.modal.ts. And inside here, this will be a TypeScript class. So let's export class todo. And in here, let's create two properties, text, which will be of type string, and completed, which will be a boolean. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the service, and let's now make this a type of to-do, and that's be imported from /todo.modal. Okay, and one thing that I actually want to do is if we go to the to-do model here, let's actually set a default state for the completed boolean. Let's set this to false, because by default the to-dos will be false when they're created. So let's save that and let's go back here, and that's good. So now let's create some methods that can manage this to-dos properties. So if we go here and let's create a get all to-dos method, and let's just return this .todos, and let's now create a method called add to-do, and it'll take in a to-do item, so to-do, and let's do this .todos.push to-do, like that, and then let's do update to-do, and it will take in the index, and it will take in the updated to-do object. And then here we just have to do this .todos, and then grab the one at the specified index, and just set it to the updated to-do object, like that. Okay, let's now go on to the next one, delete to-do, and it will take in the index. So the index is the index position of the specified to-do in the to-dos array. So this will be a number, and here we can do this .todos.splice, and then splice we provide a location. The location will be the index, and then we're going to pass in a delete count, which is the number of elements to remove, and in this case we just want to remove that one element, so let's pass in 1. Okay. Let's save that. Okay, and we can now start using this service. So let's go to the to-dos component, and let's first of all, well, we could first of all implement the add functionality and then get that to work, but let's actually put some mock data into our service so that we can then test out creating these to-do items dynamically. So let's go to the service, and let's go here and let's set this equal to an array of objects, and here we're getting an error, and it's saying that it is missing the following properties, text and completed, and that's because we set the type as to do. So we have to actually specify those types. So here let's just type in text of test, and it's still requiring the completed even though we've set it as a default type. So one way we can actually get around this is by going to the to-do model, and let's actually use a different way of doing this. Let's not put the properties here, but let's instead put them in the constructor. So let's do constructor, and inside here we can actually put in here, and we can make these public. So the reason that this works, and it looks a little bit weird right now, if I get rid of that, put that there, and then here I need to put in the curly brackets. The reason that this works is because this is a shorthand syntax for creating a class in TypeScript, where we put the properties inside the constructor. So now the constructor wants to receive the text and the completed as parameters, but it's also now creating these as properties on the class, and it knows to do this because we are adding the public keyword before the constructor parameters. So these are actually properties on the class, which the constructor expects to be passed into the constructor, right? So we are doing this because I want this to be an optional field that we don't have to declare. So here, as we are setting it equal to false, this class won't expect the completed property to be passed into the constructor. So if we go and save this and go to the data service, and now instead of doing an object like that, we can just do new to do, and we can just pass in the text here. And also here you can see that completed has this question mark after it, and that's just saying that the constructor is saying that this is an optional field. So we haven't got to pass in a completed parameter, just the text. So inside here we can type in this is a test, and let's just add one more, new to do, and let's just type in lorem ipsum, and let me actually put a long string here. So let's just go to the template and let's just copy this string here. Okay, and let's go here and let's just paste it in here. Okay, cool. Let's save that, and now if we go to the application, there will be no difference because we haven't actually implemented the code that will dynamically generate these items. So these are still the hard-coded items that we created before. So if we go back to the template, here, let's just get rid of one of the to-do items. Let's just keep this one here, the one that has the lorem ipsum text in it. So let's just go here and let's get rid of this div here. Alright, so now we only have one div inside this to-dos list class div, just one to-do item. Okay, let's save this and let's go back to the application, and now we only see this one. Okay, great. Now, the reason I've done that is because we will be using this div here as kind of a template for all the others that will be generated. And the way that we can do that is by using the ng4 directive, structural directive, and let's type in here let to-do of to-dos. So now ng4 is looping through the to-dos property in the component class, but we don't have a property here in the component class called to-dos. So here we have to create a to-dos property, and let's make this an array of to-dos, and we have to import the to-do model up here. Okay, so let's save that in the component class, and let's go to the template and let's save this, and let's go back to the application. And here we don't see anything. That's because we haven't set the value of the to-dos array. So if we go to the component class here, we have to actually set the value of this property. So if we go to the constructor and we inject the service by typing in private and then the name of the service instance. So let's just call this data service with a small letter at the start, service, which is of type data service, like that. Okay, so now let's go to the ng on init. And inside here, let's do this.todos is equal to data service, or this.data service, as it has to be there, this.data service, dot get all to-dos. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the application. And now we see two of these being displayed here. That's good because we have two items in our service. We have these two items that we created here. Now, if we go back to the template, we have to now change this so that we use string interpolation to actually inject the correct data, because right now they have the same text and they are in the completed state. So let's go and use string interpolation to get the text correct. So let's just get rid of the text here. Okay, and let's save this, and we can see that if we go back here, there's no text. Good. Let's go back here and let's now use string interpolation using two curly brackets, and let's type in to-do.text. And this to-do here is from the ng4. So here we're actually creating a variable to use. Inside here we can use to-do.text. Okay, so let's save that and let's go back to the application. And now we can see the text. This is a test and the lorem ipsum text that we have here. Awesome, so now that's working. If we go back here, we now actually have to conditionally apply the completed class here if the to-do is completed. So let's actually remove this and save that and go back to the application, and now they aren't completed. Awesome. Let's go back to the code here and let's use the class.className property binding. So class dot and then the class name completed is equal to an expression. So here we have to pass in a expression or just the Boolean value. So here we can pass in to-do.completed. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to the application, and now it looks the same. They aren't completed, and that's because we haven't set any of those to be completed. So if we go to the data service and set one of them to be completed, let's just set completed to be true, and we save that and go back to the application. Now this one is completed. Awesome. And if we go back here and we set this one to be true and the first one to be false and go back here, now this one is completed and this one isn't completed. Great, so that's working very well. Alright, so now that we've done that, we can go back to the template and we can actually start working on the functionality of this form to add a new to-do. So first of all, let's go to the form tag here. And actually, before we do that, let's go to the app.module, because we have to actually first import the forms module into the application. So if we go here and we type in import forms module from @angular/forms, okay, and then we go down here and import into the imports array forms module like that, save that, and if we close this and now go back to the template, and here we can actually create a new variable, a template variable called form, and make this equal to ng form. Okay, and the reason that we can do this is because now that we've imported the forms module, all form tags will now have this ng form available for us to be able to use it. So if we save that now, and if we go back to the application, it's all good, there's no errors or anything. Let's just check, yep, no errors. If we go back to the code here, we now need to actually be able to use this ng form object. So if we go here and we do some event binding, and we bind to the ng submit event, so as this is now a Angular form, because we've imported the forms module, and this is a form tag, as this is an Angular form, we now have access to the ng submit event on this as well. So here we can type in a method name, so something like on form submit, and then we have to actually create this method in the template, in the component class. So if we go here and we create a new method called on form submit, and I just console log form submitted. Okay, so let's save this now, and let's go back to the application, and let's get the console up. Okay, and let's try and press this. Okay, and nothing happens. So let's go and see why that is. If we go back to the template, oh, okay, because we didn't save it. Let's save this, and let's go back to the application, and let's click the add button. And now we get the form submitted shown up here. That's awesome. The reason that this is happening is because this is a button tag inside of a form, and therefore Angular thinks that the form is submitted when it's clicked. And just for future reference, if you need to ever have a button tag which isn't a submit button, you just have to set the type to a anything other than submit, right? Because it's by default it's been treated as a submit button. But for example, if we change this to type of button and save this, and we go back here and we now try and click this, now we don't see that console log because the form isn't being submitted. So we do want this to be submitted when we click on the button, so let's just change the type to submit, or you could just leave it out because it's the default behavior anyway, but let's just keep it in there anyways. Let's save that now, and let's go back here and let's click add, and now the form is submitted. Cool. So let's now use that ng form object that we've got here. So we have this ng form object set to this template variable form, so we can actually pass the form variable into here and save this, and then go back to the class here, and then we can expect a parameter in this method. So let's call this form, which will be of type ng form. Okay, and that's to be imported up here from Angular Forms. And here we can actually console log this form and see what's inside it. So if we console log the form, save that, and go back to the application, and we can just click this add button. So here we see form submitted, and then here we see the ng form object being logged here. Awesome. So this ng form object has a few things inside it. It has the form object itself, which is probably the most interesting thing. So let's go inside here. So here it has a few properties. It has the controls, which is the individual form controls. So like, for example, this input would be a control, but we haven't actually set this up yet, so it's an empty object. So we'll be soon setting this up so that we'll be registering this as a control. But we have the errors here, which is cool. We will be using this property for form validation later, and we have the status as valid. So that's pretty cool. We'll be using a lot of these properties later when we do form validation. But first of all, let's set this up so that this input is a form control. So let's go to the template, and as we are using template driven forms, most of our work will be inside the template. Alright, so let's go to this input, and to set this up as a form control, we have to use the ng-modal directive. ng-modal, like that, and we also have to add a name to it. So let's name this, and let's set the name as text. Let's save that, and let's go to the application, and let's now click the add button, and now we have the ng form, we have the form object, and now we can see inside the controls object we now have text form control. Awesome. So we've now set up one of the controls, and it's actually the only control we have in this form because it's a one field form. It's just the to-do text. So very simple. The reason that we're using a form and not just using an input and using the click event on this is because I actually want to use the validation that Angular Forms provides us. So we'll be doing the validation in just a minute. So that's cool. So now let's actually try and add a new to-do when we click on the add button. So let's go back to the code here, and let's go to the component class, and we now want to add a new to-do. So let's do this dot to do. No, actually, let's do this dot data service dot add to do, and this is expecting a to do. So how are we going to get a to do object? Well, a to do object is just a object with a text property. So we just need to grab the text from the text form control here. This text form control, right? And here we can see that it's a form control object and it has a value property. And if we actually close this and we actually type in something here and we click on add, and we see this new log here for this ng form object, and we go to the form controls and then we expand the text, then here the value property has a value of hey, and that's what we typed in here. Okay, so that's how we're going to get the text from there. So if we go back here, and here we'll just pass in a object, and we're going to set the text property as form dot, and then if we go here, we can see that we're doing form dot controls dot text. Actually, what we could do is not use controls, but instead just use the value. So instead of going all the way through the controls, let's instead use the form.value property. That's much nicer. So here we have the form, and then inside here we have the value property, which contains the text and its value, hey. Okay, and the reason that this is called text is because we actually gave the name of the field text. If you look here at actual markup, here we gave the name as text. That's why we have that as the key of this value property here, text, right? So let's go here and let's just do form.value.text. Okay, and the reason that we're getting this error here is because it's still expecting completed. So let's not use this object notation. Let's just do new to do and then pass in form.value.text as the text there. Okay, cool. So let's save that now and let's go back to the application, and let's close this actually, and let's type in something here, new to do. Let's click add, and there we go. We now have a new to do showing up here. Awesome. So that worked, and that's really, really cool. So I guess the next thing we can do is we can add some form validation here, because if we change this to an empty input and then we click add, then it adds a new to do item with no text in it, and we can just keep on doing this and it'll create lots of empty to dos, and that isn't what we want. So let's prevent that from happening by using form validation from Angular, right? So Angular Forms provides us with some pretty cool tools for form validation. So here, if we just add the required attribute here, then this will tell Angular that this form is required. It can't be empty and be valid, right? So if we save this now and we go back to the application, and let's actually open the console, and let's click add, okay? Let's go into this object, and here we can see that if we go to the valid property here and click it, it's false. Okay, so this form isn't valid. Okay, cool. So we have this property here to inform us whether or not the form is valid. But if we actually go down here, we see that it will still add it to the to-dos array. So then if we click this lots of times, then we can see that it's still adding lots of these empty to-dos. So we have to actually prevent this from happening by checking the valid property of this form object. So form.valid is false, right? So let's now go to the code, and let's go to the onFormSubmit method. And let's first of all, the first thing we can do here is we can just check if the form is invalid. So we have the form.valid here. So we could do not form.valid, or there's the form.invalid property, which is also available. So if we go here, we can see that the form.valid property is false, and the invalid property is the opposite, which is true. Okay, so I'm just going to use the invalid property, but you could also use not form.valid. And then here I'm just going to do return, and then I'm going to do alert, and then I'm just going to alert that the form is invalid. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the application, and let's click add. And now here we can see an alert that says form is invalid, and we can see here that nothing was logged to the console, and that's because we are returning here. So none of this code is reachable if the form is invalid. So that's pretty cool because we are returning it. All right, so let's go back to the application, and let's try and enter a valid to-do text. So let's just say testing. Let's click add, and now we do see that it's logged to the console, and we do see that it's being added here. Whereas if we go here and we try and add it when it's empty, we get this alert, and it isn't added to the to-dos array. Awesome. So that's working out pretty well. The next thing we can do is we can add a error message when the to-do text is invalid. So instead of showing an alert each time, we can actually show a little sort of notification here. All right, so let's go and do that now. So let's go back here. I just added a space here, so that's why it's showing that it's not saved. So I'm just going to save this. Okay, let's go to the template, and let's create that sort of notification. So first of all, I see that this indentation is a bit off, so I'm going to format the document. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to go to outside of this field. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to do key dot, and then I'm going to add the class of help, and then I'm going to add the class of is danger. Okay, then I'm going to type in form is invalid. Okay, save that, go back to the application, and now here we can see form is invalid showing up here, and the help class and the is danger class are provided by Bulma. Okay, so that's pretty cool. One thing I want to fix is there's quite a lot of space in between here. I want to actually reduce this space. So that's because the field has margin. So I'm going to remove the margin from the field. So if I go to the code here, and I go to the field class, we could do style margin 0, and that would work. So let's just do that. Yeah, and that's good enough. We could have also used a class by Bulma called my0, and that is a helper class from Bulma. If we actually go to documentation, I can show you the helpers documentation. Helpers. There's some. I think it's spacing. Yes, so there is some margin helpers, and here you can see that for both the left margin and the right margin you use mx because that's the x-axis, but for top and bottom you'd use my. So that's what I was saying, we could use my0 to give it a value of 0. But anyways, we don't need that because we just have to do margin 0 as a style, and that's perfectly fine. So let's save that, let's go back here, and that looks pretty good. now let's actually put a more descriptive error message here. So let's go back here and let's change this. And let's say to-do text is required. Or we could say please enter the text of your to-do. Okay, so that's more, user-friendly, I guess. It's less formal, I guess. All right, so let's save that and let's go back to the application. And now it says, please enter the text of your to-do. Cool. So now we have to solve the problem of hiding and showing it based on whether or not the form is invalid. So here it should show, although we may want to hide this later on and only show it once they've actually entered some text or tried to submit the form, because otherwise straight away they see the error messages. It's not very nice. So we will change this later, but in theory, as this is empty, then this should show. But then after we've entered some text, so now this is valid, so this should be hidden, right? So let's go and work on that. Let's go here. And here I'm going to actually create a container for all of our error messages, because we may want to add some more validation requirements, such as a min length, right? So like, for example, we could go here and say min length 2 and save that, and then we could go back here. And if we go here and we type in A and then click add, here it says form is invalid because we've added the min length attribute to this field, right? If you go here, we've added the min length 2. So let's type in A1 and click add. Now it's valid and it's been added here. Okay, so I'm going to create a container element for all of these error messages, because here we'd want to create another one here and we'd want to say text or to-do text must be at least 2 characters. So then if we save this and we go back here, then we see them both. And I want to actually just put this in a container. Actually, we don't actually have to put them in a container yet, because by default there'll only be one showing at one time once we've actually put the ngIfs on them. So let's actually do that first. Let's go and put ngIfs on these error messages. So let's do ngIf, and then here we actually have to put in a condition for whether or not the field is invalid. And the way that we're going to do that is we actually need to have access to the form control object, right? Because if we go to the console here, and let's actually type in test, click add, and let's look at the ng form object. And if we go to the form and we go to the controls, we see here that the text is a form control. So the form control objects, they have a field called invalid and valid. Just like the form object itself, it has an invalid and valid property. So we want to access the invalid object here in the ngIf here, right? So to do that, we actually have to create a new template variable as the input. So let's actually go here and let's create a new variable called to-do text field, and let's set this equal to ng modal. So then the ng modal is available to us here, which is the object. So then this to-do text field is now the ng modal object, which is just the form control object that we saw in the console here. So if we go back to the code and copy this and then go to the ngIf and then say ngIf to-do text field dot invalid and save this and then go here, then it's showing that because it's invalid. But if we set this to text, now it's gone, right? Because it is now valid. But now if we go here and get rid of the second character, now it's showing up. Okay, so we are now showing this just when it's invalid. Let's copy this and put it here, save this, go back here, and now they're both showing. Okay, but then if I type in te, then it's gone, and now they're both showing. And the reason that they're both showing is because I'm just using the invalid property, so it's showing all of the error messages. But if we don't want to do that, then we can actually just use the errors object. So let's actually look at that. Let's type in a valid object, text here, and click add. And then here we can see the ng form object. And then we can go to the form object and we can go to controls and text. And then here we have the errors field here. So it's null here. But if we actually go back to the code here and we prevent prevent the code from returning when it's invalid because we need to access the form, or let's just move this. Let's move this code down here so that we get this form in the console so that we can see the errors, right? Let's save that and let's go back to the application. Let's just click add, and now we do see this ng form object. Let's go to the controls. Let's go to text, and now here the errors property isn't null. It's an object which has required true. The keys of the errors object are the names of the validation rules, right? So here it says required true, meaning that the required validation rule has an error. And it's only showing one at a time. So that's really cool because it means that only one of these can be shown at one time if we set up the ngIfs properly to just look at the errors fields, right? So if we go to the template, and instead of having the ngIf as just invalid, let's look at the errors property, and let's look at the specific ones. So in this case, this is the error message for the required property. The required validation rule. So here we can just type in required because we saw that this is the name that was given to the key in the error object. Okay, so we want to see if the required error is there. Okay, so let's do that for that one, and let's just copy this and let's paste it in here, and let's change this to min length. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to the application. Okay, and we're getting an error here. Cannot read property required of no. Alright, cool. So the reason this is happening is because here we are trying to access the errors object, and there is none, right? Cannot read property required of no. Alright, so this is because of the way that the form is set up, and the template is being rendered before the form is properly set up. So at first, when the UI is rendered, it tries to find required in the errors property, but it doesn't exist yet. So one way that we can fix this is by creating a container object which only shows when the form is invalid, or sorry, when the form field is invalid. So here we could create a div and put an ngIf on it and say that it will only be shown when to-do text field is invalid. And then we can move these two paragraph tags inside there and save that. Let's go back to the application, and we no longer get that error. Awesome. It's also useful just in general to have this inside a container so that we can control the display of the error messages based on other properties. So for example, in just a minute, we will probably need to have to create a new property that will conditionally show and hide the error messages. Okay, so let's go back to the application and let's just make sure this works. So here we only see one error message. That's great. And that's because the error object only has one field at a time, right? So then here, let's type in one character, and then it changes to this error here. And that's pretty cool because it's not nice to have lots of errors. It's just nice to have one error that you can fix, and then you can move on to the next errors. So here, let's type in T, and now we get this error here that the text must be at least 2 characters. Now type in E, and now there's no error messages at all. And now we can click add, and it's now down here. Awesome. So what I want to do next is I want to hide the error messages when we first load in the page, because currently, if we reload the page, here we always see the error message, and that isn't very nice. So let's hide the error message until the user tries to submit an invalid form. Okay, so let's go to the code here, and let's go to the component class, and let's create a new property called show validation errors, and this is going to be a boolean. Okay, and here, let's not show this alert because I don't think we need to show the alert if we now have these error messages down here, right? So let's not show an alert, but let's instead do this.show validation errors, and let's set this equal to true. Okay, and now let's go to the template, and now we can add a new condition to the ngIf, and we can say show only if the to-do text field is invalid and show validation errors is true. Okay, so let's save this now and let's go back to the application. And now that has gone away, it's now hidden. So now we no longer see the validation errors when we first load the page. Okay, cool. So let's now try and click add. And now we do see the error because we tried to submit an invalid form. So now it's showing us the errors here. Awesome. Let's now try and enter in a new to-do that is completely valid and click add. That's good. But now we want to actually reset the form so that this text goes away because it has added it here, but it doesn't look like it's added it because it hasn't actually reset the text in here. So let's go and do that now. Let's go to our component class, and I guess just after we've added the to-do, and here we can do form.reset. Okay, so let's save that and let's go back to the application and let's try and type in testing and click add, and now it's reset the form. Awesome, so that's really cool. Let's try and click add here, and now we see the error here. Great. And now let's try and type in a valid to do and click add. But now we get this validation error when the form is reset. That isn't what we want to do because the form should reset and it should not show any of the validation errors. So let's go back to our application. Let's go here and let's do this dot show validation errors is equal to false. Okay, so once we've added a to do, then we want to set this to false so that it doesn't show the errors. Okay, so if we save this now and go back to the application, okay, so now if we click add, then it shows it. That's cool. If we try and add a new one and click add, it adds it, it clears the text here, and we don't see the error. Awesome. All right, so that's pretty cool. And if we go down here, we can see that's been added here. Cool. All right, so that's pretty cool. And I think the next thing we can do is we can start working on the click functionality of these to-do items. Okay, cool. So I think we're done with this form. Let's actually just quickly go and do a bit of a cleanup. Let's get rid of these console logs. We don't need them. Okay, let's save that and go back to the application. And also, one thing that I want to mention is that as this is a form, when you type in something here, you can actually press enter and it will actually submit the form. So now it's added a test here and it's cleared the text here. So that's pretty cool. Cool, all right, so let's close this and let's work on the click functionality of these to-do items. So let's go to the template and let's go to the to-do item div here. And all right, okay, so before we add the click functionality to the to-do items, let's actually extract this to-do item code into its own component so that we can clean up this to-do component file and we can put this in its own component. All right, so let's go and open a new terminal and let's generate a new component and let's call this to-do -item. Okay, and then we have this new folder here and it contains all of the files. So let's grab this markup. Let's go here and let's cut this to-do item code. And now let's go to the to-do item component template and let's get rid of this and paste in that code there. And let's format the document. Okay, cool. So let's get rid of the ng4 here because that will be done in the to-dos component. And I think everything else can stay the same. Yeah, okay. So let's save this now and let's go to the to-dos component HTML. Okay, and here we type in the selector of the new to-do item component, which is app-to-do-item. And we know this because by default it's app and then the name of the component. And we can confirm this by going to the component class and we can see the selector is app-to-do-item. Okay, so let's go back here and that should now work. So let's save this and let's go back to the application And here we see this, okay? So if we go to the console, we can see an error here. So first of all, there's no styles being applied onto this. And the reason for this is because the styles that we created were specific to the to-dos component. So we have to move the styles that are related to the to-do item into the to-do item component. And second of all, we have this error here which says that it cannot read the property of completed of undefined. And that's caused by, if we go to the to-do item component.html, here we see that we are referencing to-do.completed. And in this component, there is no to-do property. So let's first of all fix this error here. So let's go here and let's create a to-do property. Okay, and that's of type to-do, which has to be imported up here. And let's now save this and let's go back to the application. And we still get this error because we haven't created a to-do in that component, right? So it's still undefined. So we could set this to a new to-do and see if that fixes the error. Here it needs some text, so test. Let's save that and go back to the application. And now we don't have the error anymore and we see test here. Great. But we want this to be completely dynamic based on a input property so that we can pass in any data we want, and this to-do item component will then display the correct text and the correct styling based on the completed property and everything like that. So let's make this dynamic by going to the component class and setting this property to an input property. Okay, so to do that, we can use the decorator at input. And this is provided by Angular and it has to be imported up here. And let's get rid of this now. All right, so we now need to pass in a to-do into this component from the parent component. So let's save this and let's go to the to-dos component.html as this is the parent component. And here we have to pass in the to-do object using property binding. But first of all, we first need the to-do object. So we have the to-dos array of objects, but we want to actually render all of them. So let's use ng4 and say let to-do of to-dos. Okay, and let's save this and let's go back to the application. Okay, so here we can see the error, and that makes sense because we aren't passing in a to-do into the app to-do item. So that makes sense. But here we can see that we have many copies of this. We have here we have, let's close this. Yep, so here we have 2 to-do items. Okay, so that's good. Let's go back here and let's pass in the to-do to the component using property binding. So to-do is equal to to-do. All right, so here we are using property binding with these square brackets to set the to-do property on the app to-do item component. If we go here, we can see that this is a property called to-do, and that's what we're doing here. And here we are setting it to to-do, which is the current iteration of the ng4. Okay, so let's save this now and let's go back to the application. And now we see that we have the correct text being rendered here. Cool. All right, so now let's go and fix the styling. So let's go to the style sheet for the to-dos component. And here we have all of this styling that we created for the to-do item. And it's scoped to this component. So these styles aren't being applied to the to-do item component. Okay, so let's just go and grab all of this, all of these styles. Okay, and let's cut that. Okay, and now let's go to the to-do item style sheet and paste that in. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the to-dos style sheet and let's just save this, close this, and let's now go back to the application, and now we can see the styling. Awesome. All right, so we haven't got any errors. That's good, and it seems to all be working pretty nicely. Cool. All right, so now let's work on the click functionality to set it to be completed. So let's go back to our code here. Let's go to the to-do item template. So let's go to the template here, and here we want to set a click event on the whole to-do here, and here we want to say on to do clicked. And let's now save this, and let's go to the component class, and let's create a new method called on to do clicked. Okay, and inside here, let's just do a console log. To do was clicked, and let's go back to the application, and let's go to the console, and let's try and click this, and now we see that it was clicked. Okay, cool. All right, so it's happening each time we click on the to-dos. Cool. All right, so now we want to go back to the code, and we want to emit a event each time the to-do is clicked, so that the parent component can then use event binding to listen to those events. All right, so here we can use the @output decorator. Okay, and that has to be imported from Angular core. And here, let's call this to-do clicked. And this is of type event emitter, and the event type is of type void, and that's because we aren't going to be sending any data. It's just going to be a signal that the to-do was clicked. And let's import this. So let's go here, and let's import it from Angular core. Okay, and then here let's just set this equal to a new event emitter, like that. Okay. Cool, so that should now work, and inside here we can now get rid of this and instead do this.todo clicked.emit. Okay, so now if we save this and then we go to the to-dos component, and we can now use event binding to listen to that event. So let's type in to-do clicked, and let's set this equal to a method that we'll call on to-do clicked. Okay, and let's save this, and let's go to the component class for the to-dos component, and let's go here and let's create that method on to-do clicked. And here we can now do a alert that says to-do was clicked. This code is being executed in the to-dos component. Okay, let's save that, and let's go back to the application, and let's try and click on a to-do. And there we go, so now we can see this alert. Great. Let's now go back to the code, and let's get rid of this. And inside here, we want to set to-do to completed. So what we can do here is we can take in the to-do that was clicked, so to-do. Okay, and then let's just actually change this to set completed. Set completed. Okay. And let's get rid of this, and inside here we can now do to-do.completed is equal to not to-do.completed. And actually, let's just change this to toggle completed. Okay, so now each time we click on a to-do item, we are changing the completed property to the inverse of its current value. So, for example, if it's true, then it will set it to not true, which evaluates to false. And if it's false, then it would be not false, which will evaluate to true. Okay, so then it will just switch the value. All right, let's save this, and let's go back to the application, and let's click on this one. Okay, we get an error. Oh, yeah, that's because we changed the name of the function, of the method. So let's just grab this, and let's go here. To the template, and let's change the name of this. Let's paste that in. Okay, let's save that, and let's go back to the application. And let's try and click on this. Cannot be property completed of undefined. Okay, yeah, that's because I forgot to pass in to do here. All right, so let's just pass in the to do here, and let's actually just quickly reformat this a little bit to make it more readable. Okay, cool. All right, so let's save this, and let's go back to the application, and hopefully this time it will work. Awesome. So now it's working. One thing I'm noticing is that the checkbox border isn't transitioning. So let's go and fix that now. Let's go to the style sheet of the to-do item. Let's go to here, and let's go to the checkbox styles. Yeah, here. Okay. All right. So here, let's actually just add border color to the transition property and set this to 0.2 seconds. Let's save that and let's go back to the application and hopefully it should now work. Awesome, so now it's looking much better. Cool, all right. So the next thing we can do is we can work on the edit and the delete buttons. And one thing I want to do is I actually want to change this so that the delete button has a dark red color on hover and not just on click. So let's go and do that now. Let's go here and let's go down to the bottom. So here we've done this on active. Let's change this to hover. And let's save that and let's go back here. Okay, so that's much better. And maybe on active we can make it maybe more red or something. Let's see. Let's go here and let's just do a Control C, Control V. Okay. Let's change this to active. And let's see what it looks like if it's just a bit lighter. Save that. Let's make it a little bit lighter. Cool, alright, so I think that looks good. So yes, I think we can now move on to adding the functionality for these control buttons. One thing I quickly want to fix though is the fact that each time we click on one of these buttons, then the on to do clicked event is being fired, right? So it's being set to completed and not completed each time we click on these controls here. So that's not what we want. The reason that this is happening is because when we click on the buttons, as they're inside the main to-do item div, if we look here, as we have this main to-do item div and there's the click event on this div, and we are clicking on these buttons here, then they're kind of propagating up to this click event, right? So the way that we can fix this is if we create a click event on the to-do controls box, and now we can actually stop the propagation of the event upwards, right? So here we have the we have access to the event variable, and then we can do dot stop propagation, and this should now work. So let's save that and let's go back to the application. Okay, and let's now try and click on these. Okay, and we get an error. Stop propagation is not a function. Okay, so I may have spelled this incorrectly. Yes, I think I need an A instead of an O there. Propagation, yeah, okay. Save that now, and let's go back to the application. And let's try this again. Let's click here. Awesome, so now we get no errors, and it isn't being set to completed or uncompleted each time we click on these control buttons. And it's still working here. Cool, so that's exactly what we want. Awesome. Alright then, so now let's actually implement the functionality for the edit button. Alright, so let's go back to the code. And the way that we're going to do this is we are going to listen to the click event of the edit button. So on edit clicked. Okay, let's save that and let's go to the component class and let's create a new method called on edit clicked. Okay, and let's create another output and let's call this edit clicked. Okay, and let's go here, and then here let's just do this dot edit clicked dot emit. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to the to-dos template here, and let's do the same thing as we did here for the edit clicked, and here let's just say edit to do, and let's pass in the to do, and let's save that now and let's go to the component class and let's create a new method here called edit to do, and we can take in the to do, and here we want to now do this dot data service dot update to do, and here we have to now pass in the index of the to do and then the updated to do. So here we have two problems. We actually have to get the index, and we actually have to have a way for the user to enter the updated details. Okay, so let's just do a comment there and say we need index of to do, and user needs to enter new information. Okay, so first of all, let's try and solve this problem. So we could do this by doing index is equal to this dot to-dos dot index of, and then we can pass in the to-do. Okay, so that should work. One other way of doing it is we could have gotten the index straight from the ng4 by going to the template and then doing index as I, like that, and then here we now have the index here that we could pass into the edit to do method. But let's just try the first way, and then if that doesn't work, then we can do that. But I'm pretty sure we can just go into the component class and where is it? And yeah, so this should work. All right, so let's do that. And now we need to create a way for the user to input the new information. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to be using a modal. And more specifically, we'll be using a Angular material dialog. So let's go to the Angular material site. And here we can see that we have components. And if we go to this component here, we have the mat dialog component. So for example, if we click here, we can actually see that these are the sorts of modals we have here. All right, so let's go to the main page here, and let's click on Get Started. And here we're able to actually use the ng-add command to add Angular material to our project. So let's do that. Let's go back to our code here, and let's go to the terminal, and let's paste that in, and then press enter. Okay, and let's pick the theme. So let's go with indigo pink, and let's set up the global Angular material styles. Let's say no for that, and let's set up browser animations. Yes, okay, and that will now install. All right, okay, so now we can go to the styles.scss. And here they've actually added some styles for us. If you go to the bottom, we can see that they've added this for us. We don't really need this font family here, so let's remove that. And these two we can keep. These two, I guess we could let's just move these. Let's just cut that and move them up here. Like that. Okay, so let's save that now. And let's close that, and now we should be able to use a dialog in here. So if we go back to the documentation, then here we can see that we need to create a component so that we can then pass it into the open method so that it will then open that component in a dialog. Okay, so let's go to the examples and see this one. Okay, let's look at the code for this one. Okay, yeah. All right, so let's just go back here. And let's go back to our code and let's start doing this. So let's use the Angular CLI to create a new component. Let's call this, let's call this component edit to do dialog. Okay, and then let's go and find that component here, and let's go to the template, and let's just quickly do the markup for this. So h1 with a class of title, edit to do, and then let's create a div here which has the mat-dialog-content directive, and that is from the material design library. And then inside here we can have our form to edit the to-do. So let's create a form tag, and let's get rid of the action. Okay, and inside here, let's just create a form variable and set that equal to ng-form. And then we can listen to the ng-submit. And we can do on form submit and pass in the form. Okay, let's just quickly go to the component class here, and let's quickly create that method on form submit, and it takes in the form. Okay, and that's of type ng form, which is imported up here. Okay, so let's go here and let's quickly create the markup for this form. So let's create a div which has the class of field, and inside here we can have a control, and inside here we can have input which has the class of input, and let's set the placeholder to type to do text here. Okay, and let's leave that for now, and let's now create the submit and cancel buttons. So let's go here and let's just put a line break here, and let's create a field which is grouped and is grouped right. Okay, and let's create a control which has a cancel button, and let's add the class is light, like that, and let's create one other control which has a submit button, and let's just say save, and let's set the type to submit, as this is the button that we want to submit the form, and this button we don't want to submit the form, we want to just set this to a normal button. Okay, so let's save that now, and let's now go to the component class. Okay, and here we have to do a few things and inject a few things for this to work. So let's do public dialog ref is of type mat dialog ref, and then inside these arrow brackets we have to pass in the name of the component, like that, and here we actually have to import this. So first of all, let's go to the app.module, and inside here we have to import the dialog module. So let's quickly do that now. Let's go down here and let's import mat dialog module from @angular /material/dialog. Okay, let's now add this to the imports down here, and let's save that, and let's go back to the edit to do dialog component, and here we can now import that from the Angular material dialog. Okay, so let's create the second thing here. Okay, so the second thing we have to inject is the dialog data. So let's use the @inject. Let's use @inject, and this is a token. So here let's pass in the mat_dialog data token, and this is going to be a public property which is called to do and is of type to do. Okay, so we'll be passing in the to do object into this material dialog, and that is why we have to do this, so that we can pass in the existing to do item into this dialog, so that we can show all of the data that we need to show, and then on form submit we will close the dialog and pass back the data to the calling component, so that the to do can be updated. So let's save this now, and first of all let's go to the template again, and for this cancel button let's just set up a click event, and here let's just call a method called close, and let's go back to the component class and let's create that here, and here let's just do this .dialogRef.close. Okay, let's save that now, and let's now go to the to-dos component, and let's open this dialog. Okay, so let's go here and let's do, alright, here let's actually just go back to documentation, and here we can see this is how they open the dialog. So let's just paste that in there. We don't want to set the width, the height I mean, but the width we can set. So let's set the width as 800 pixels, or about 700 pixels I think maybe, And this we have to inject in the constructor. So here we can do private dialog, which is of type max dialog. I think this should be it. And that's to be imported up here. Okay, so let's go back down here, and here we should do this dot dialog dot open, and then this should be the name of the component, which is the dialog, the edit to do dialog component. Okay, so that has to be imported up here as well. Okay, so that should now work. Let's save that and let's see if it works. So let's go back to the application and let's click on the edit button. Okay, cool. So we have something happening. We see this component here and it kind of animated in, but we aren't getting the normal styles of the material dialog. For example, there should be like an overlay here and this should be centered. So I think some of the styling is a bit not working, but something is happening, so that's pretty cool. Let's go and see if we have to import some sort of styles. What might have happened is the theme may not have been imported properly. So let's go to styles.scss and let's import the theme manually. So let's go and let's find Angular material themes. And let's find a import. Let's see if it was in the index.html. Let's see if it was put there. Okay, so here we can see that the ng add command that we did had automatically imported these two things here. So it's imported the material icons, which we had already. So this one we can actually get rid of. Let's get rid of this one. And this one here is Roboto, and we're not actually using this font. So this one we can actually get rid of as well. Okay. Alright, so let's just save that. We still have the problem of the theme not being imported. So let's go and fix that. So here we can see that they're importing the Amber theme. Let's just copy this and let's go to our application code and let's go to styles.scss. And then up here, I guess we can just import the theme. Let's not import the Amber one though. Let's import Indigo Pink. I think that might be nicer. Let's import this one. Let's just replace this, paste that there. Okay, cool. So let's now go back to our application and let's see if this fixed the issue. Let's go here and click on the edit button. And there we go. So now we can actually see the dialog. Cool, awesome. So it's actually working properly. Cool, so now here, this is the cancel button and that hides it nicely. That's good. And all of that, that's cool. So let's go and style this save button. Let's go back to our code and let's go to the to do dialog template here, and let's go to this button and let's give it the same class as the one on our main screen, this one here, which is the alt gradient button class. So alt gradient button. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to our application and let's click on the edit button, and now it has that nice styling. Great. But now we actually have to add the icon. So let's go back here and let's add that icon. So here let's do i.materialIcons and let's use the save icon. Let's save that and let's go back to the application. And there we go. So now we have a save button there as well. Cool. All right. So that's pretty nice. So now we actually have to pass in the to-do object of the to-do that we clicked on, right? So in this case, we should be passing in this to-do object into the edit dialog. Okay. So let's go back to our code and let's go to the to-do's component class, and then here we can actually pass in the data. And the data in this case is the to-do. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to our application. Let's click on the edit button and it's still the same. And the reason for that is we haven't actually set up the ng model on the input. So if we go to the template for this dialog and we go to the input field, we can actually set this up to use ng model, and we can use property binding to set this equal to to-do.text. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to the application and let's click on the edit button. And here we have this error. If ngModal is used within a form tag, then the name attribute must be set, or the form control must be defined as standalone. Okay, so in this case, because we have the form control here, and we want this to be part of the form, we actually have to set the name. So let's set name to text. Okay, so it's the name of the property here, text, right? So let's save that and let's go back to the application and let's click on the edit dialog. And there we go. So here we can actually see that the input has been set to the text of the to-do. For some reason we're getting all these errors. I'm not too sure why this is. I think this might just be something to do with ngserve. What's going on here? No directive found with export as ngForm. Oh, okay, so we're getting errors here. So ngForm isn't working. If we go to the to-dos component, ngForm is working here. So let me actually just clean up my workspace here. Let's just close all the tabs and let's go to the to-dos component template and let's go to the edit dialog component. Okay, so that's a bit cleaner. Alright, so the ngForm is working here, but it's not working here. Alright, let me just try and save this again, see if that fixes it. No, okay. Oh, okay, here it's now saying... Okay, let's go to the app.module, see if there's anything wrong in there. The forms module is being imported properly. Okay, I'm not too sure what's going on. Let me actually just try and restart ngserve. Let's see if that fixes the issue. Alright, so that seems to have compiled successfully. Let's go back to the application, reload the page. Okay, we don't get the errors anymore. Let's try this again. Let's go to the edit dialog. Alright, okay, so we don't get any errors. Cool, alright, so that seems to fix the issue. Just restarting the server. Alright, cool. So, yeah, so now it's working. We now have the to-do object passed into the dialog, and we are now seeing the to-do text in this input. Great. So that's pretty cool. Let's now try and save this. Let's try and update this. And click save. And there isn't anything happening. And that's because we haven't put anything inside inside the onFormSubmit method. So let's go to the component class. And here we have to do a few things. So first of all, here let's do this.dialogRef.close. And let's close with a dialog result. So here we can see it's optional. So here we did it with no result, which means it's just closing and it's kind of like cancelling the dialog, right? But here we are going to close with a value. So inside here, we want to put in the updated to-do. So what we want to do is we want to pass in form.value, as that contains the to-do text. However, it only contains the text and not the completed property, because the completed property isn't really a form value. It's just something you can change by clicking on the to-do item. So if we left it like this, then the completed field would be set to its default value, which is false. So we want to actually preserve the to-do object and just change the text. So what we could do is we could do this.todo is equal to, or we could do this.todo.text is equal to form.value.text, and then pass in this.todo here. And that would work. One other way to do it is you could create a updated to-do object and just set this equal to all of the fields from this.todo. So here we are unpacking the to-do object and providing all of the fields and values of this.todo. And then we could do the same thing for the form.value. And we're putting this afterwards so that any of the fields in form.value will override those ones in this.todo. So this approach is kind of it's kind of more scalable if you had more fields, right? In this case, we only have this field, so we could just do this, but let's just use this way for now. So let's just get rid of this. And instead of passing this .todo, let's pass in the updated to-do object, like that. All right, so let's save that now. And we now have to actually go back to the to-dos component class so that we can then get the result of the dialog. Okay, so here let's do dialog ref dot after closed, and this is an observable. So so here we can see that it's an observable that is notified when the dialog is finished closing. So let's subscribe to this, and here we get the dialog result. Okay, and first of all, we have to actually check if it exists. And that's because, for example, when we close it like this, we aren't providing any result, so it can be null, right? So, okay, so here we actually have to check if it exists, and if it exists, then we want to do this dot data service dot update to do, and we want to pass in the index, which is up there, up here, and we want to pass in the updated to do, which is the result. Okay, let's save that now, and let's see if this works. Let's go back to our application, and let's go here, and let's change this to updated, and click save. And there we go, it's now updated. Cool, alright, so that seems to work. Let's try and go here, and let's change this to this has been updated. Let's click save, and there we go. Awesome. So we can now update these to-dos. Let's try and change this one again. Lorem ipsum. Click save, and there we go. Let's also try and press enter. So let's just try update, press enter. Awesome, so that also works. Okay, cool. So that's pretty cool. Let's now actually implement some form validation on this field here. Because currently we can actually just change this to no text and click save, and then it will change it there. So we want to add a very similar sort of thing as we have here when we can't actually add a empty to do. So let's go back to our code, and let's go to the template for the edit to do dialog, and let's actually implement some validation. So let's just reformat this a little bit here so it's more readable. Okay, and let's add a few validation rules. Alright, so let's add required, and let's also add min length is equal to 2, I think it is. Let's go back to the to-dos component, and in this form we have min length 2. Yeah. Alright, so let's go back here and say min length 2, yes, and let's save this now, and let's go back to our application. Let's try and edit this. Let's get rid of all of this text, click save, and it still sets it as an empty to do. So that isn't good. The reason for that is because we haven't actually prevented, here we actually have to do if form.invalid, we actually have to do return. Okay, so if we just return there, and then save that, and go back to application, and if we try and do that again, then this shouldn't work. If we click save, then it isn't allowing us to save. Great. Alright, so then at this point, we want to actually show a error message. So let's go and implement that now. Let's go back to our code, and let's actually just go to the to-dos component, and let's just grab what we have here. Let's just grab that, copy that, and go to the to-do dialog component, and let's paste that in here, like that. Okay, so here let's just create a template variable called to-do text field. Okay, and here, as we aren't creating a new to-do, the to-do text field will unlikely be empty, right? So we probably don't need to have this show validation errors boolean to prevent error from showing in those sorts of situations, right? So I don't think we actually have to implement this in the edit dialog. So let's just have this one condition here, and let's save this, and let's go back to our application, and let's try and edit this. Let's get rid of all of the text, and it isn't actually showing, which is interesting. Alright, so it's not showing any of the error messages. So let's go and see why that is. Let's go back to our code. To do text field. Oh, okay, so this has to be set equal to ng model. All right, let's save that and let's go back to our application and let's go here and click edit and let's get rid of all of this text. And there we go. So now we can see the error. Cool. All right, so that's pretty cool. Let's now click save and it has updated to test. Nice. Let's change this to A and can we save it? Nope, we can't save it. Great. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So we have successfully implemented the edit functionality. Cool. All right. So the next thing we can do is we can implement the delete functionality. Let's go and do that now. Let's just close this. Actually, let's just check if there's any errors. No errors. That's cool. Let's close this and let's go back to our application. And we can now go and implement the delete functionality. So let's close this. Let's close this. And let's close. Actually, no, we need this. Let's just quickly clean this up. Let's get rid of this comment. And let's get rid of this. And okay, so let's save this now. And let's now just go and confirm it's all working properly still. Let's change this. Okay, I can't submit. Cool. Test, save. Cool. All right, let's go back here and let's now go and implement the delete functionality. So let's go to the to-do item. Let's go to the template and let's go to the delete button. And here, let's try and listen to the click event. And here, let's call a method called onDeleteClicked. And this is something we have to create. So let's go to, let's save this and then let's go to the component class and let's create a new method called onDeleteClicked. And here we actually want to create a new event emitter. So let's do a duplication of that and let's just change this to delete clicked. Okay, and then let's go down here and here we can do this .deleteClicked.emit like that. Okay, let's save that now and let's now go to the to-dos component template and let's go down here and let's listen to the delete clicked event and then here we can do delete to do and pass in the to do and let's save this and let's go to our component class and let's create a new method called delete to do. And then inside here we can do this dot data service dot delete to do and this requires an index. So here we actually have to do const index is equal to this dot to do's dot index of and pass in the to do and then here we can pass in the index and there we go. Alright, so let's save that now and let's go back to the application and let's see if this works. Let's click on the delete button and there we go. It has now gone and we only have this one. Awesome. Let's try and add a few more. So 1, add 2, add 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's delete this one. There we go. Let's set this as completed. Let's set this as completed. Let's unset this as completed. Okay, cool. That's looking good. Let's now go to 2 and delete it. And now we have 1, 3, 4, and 5. So 2 was deleted. Let's click on 5. Let's delete that. Let's delete and delete. Awesome. So it seems to all be working pretty nicely. Cool. All right. So the next thing we can do is we can see how this will look when there's a lot of items. So I'm just going to type in test and I'm going to keep on creating items. All right. So I've created a lot of items here. And what we could do is we could make this new to-do section here stay stuck to the top of the UI when we are scrolling down so that the user always has access to the new to-do form. Cool, alright, so let's go and do that. Let's go back to the code and let's just make this a bit smaller and let's go to the todos.component.html template and let's go up here and we want to actually add some styles to this div here. So let's just give this another class. So let's just call this add to do box container, and let's save this, and then let's go to the style sheet, and let's go here and let's do add to do box container, and then now here we want to set the position to sticky so that it stays stuck to the top. Okay, so let's do position sticky, and if we save this and go back to the application and we create a lot of to-dos, okay, and it's not working. The reason it's not working is because we actually have to set top to 0, okay, so that now the browser knows to stay stuck when the top of the box is at the top of the UI. Okay, so let's save that and let's go back to the application and let's create some to-dos. Okay, and if we scroll down, now we can see that it's stuck to the top, and that's awesome. However, we have one problem, and that is that it is somehow still showing the to-do items that are underneath it, and that's because we have to actually set the Z index so that it's on top of the other content. Okay, so let's set that to 1. Okay, save that, and then let's go back to the application and let's try this again. Okay, and now let's scroll down, and now it's stuck to the top and we can't see underneath it. Awesome. Cool. Alright, so that's pretty cool. Let's try and delete some things here. Okay, alright, cool. So the next thing we can do is we could add some tooltips to these control buttons. So for example, when we hover over this edit button, then we should be able to see the edit to do tooltip, and the same thing with the delete button. So let's go and add some tooltips. So for this, I want to use a library called Tippy. So if I just search for Tippy.js, I want to use this one here. And if you could just go to the page. So then I want to create some tooltips that look like this for our application. So I want to create those. Alright, so let's actually import this into our project. So let's go back here, and here we can see that we can install it using npm. So let's go back to our code, let's go to the terminal, and I'm going to do npm install, and then type in Tippy. I think it was just Tippy, it might be in Tippy.js. Okay, yep, so it's .js, and then -- save, press enter. Okay, and once that's completed, we can now go to, let's just close these tabs here actually. Let's close all of these, and let's go to the to-do item, component class. Okay, and in here we can import Tippy. So let's import, and then type in Tippy from, and then Tippy.js, like that. And now we can go down here, and we can actually implement after view init, and that's because we have to use this lifecycle hook because we need access to the HTML elements, and it's not good to do it on init, but when you're doing things like accessing the HTML elements, we should use the after view init lifecycle hook. Okay, so now we need to go and go here and create the ng after view init method. Okay, and we could just say that this returns void, I guess. Okay, and now what we can do is we can do, well, here we can call Tippy. So here we can now pass in a HTML element. So for this to work, I'm going to go to the to-do item template, and I'm going to go to the to-do control for the edit button, this one here, and I'm going to create a template reference variable, and I'm going to call this edit btn, and I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go to the component class, and I'm going to use viewChild to access that element. So at viewChild, and then I'm going to pass in the selector, which in this case will just be the name of the template variable, which was edit btn, and then this will be a property, so I need to give it a name. So I'm going to call it edit btn element reference elref, and then that'll be of type element ref, and then of type HTML element. Okay, there we go. And this needs to be imported, I think. Yep, that's to be imported from at Angular core. There we go. Okay, so now that we have that, I can save this, and let's just comment this out for a minute, and let's just console log. This is the edit btn element, and then I'm going to console log the element. So this dot edit btn element reference dot native element. Okay, so let's save that, and let's now go back to the application, and let's open the console. And here we can see two of these console log statements which show the edit button, and that's because we have two items. Okay, so here we have access to this element here, so that's pretty cool. So now we can pass this into Tippy. So let's go back to our code, and here we can call Tippy and pass in this dot edit btn element ref dot native element, and I think we have to set the content using the props. So I think here we can type in the content, and here we can say test tooltip. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the application, and let's hover over this and hover over this. Cool. And here we can now see this test tooltip showing. Awesome. All right, cool. So the first thing we now have to do is we have to import the styles because it's not styled currently. So let's go here and let's find the CSS. So here we have to import the CSS like that. All right, so let me just copy this, copy that, and I'm going to go back to the code, and I'm going to go to styles.scss, and I'm going to import it here. Okay, and let's just do @import, and let's just paste that in there inside single quotes like that. Let's save that now, and let's go back to the application, and let's see if it works. Awesome. Okay, cool. So there we go. So now we have a styled tooltip when we hover over the edit button. So that's cool. So we can go back to our application, and we can go here to the component class, and we can just change this to edit to do like that. Save that and go back to the application, and there we go. Cool. So that's working really nicely. One thing we could do is we could now create an Angular directive which handles all of this for us, so that we don't have to do the creating of the template reference variable and all of that setup. Okay, so let's create an Angular directive that will handle all of this for us. Okay, so let's go back to our application, and let's go to the terminal, and let's generate a directive. So ng generate directive, and then the name of the directive, which will be tooltip. Okay, so let's just call this tooltip. Okay, press enter, and that should generate that for us. And actually, now that I think about it, we should probably put this inside the shared folder. So it's generated this file here, the tooltip.directive.ts. Let's actually move this into the shared folder. There we go. Let's move that. And okay, and let's now go to app.module. And let's go here, and here we see that there's an error, and that's because this file no longer exists in that location. So let's update this. So let's do /shared/tooltip.directive. There we go. Okay, let's save that now and close that. And let's see here, there's no errors, that's good. All right, so let's go back here, and let's now go to the tooltip.directive.ts. All right, okay, so inside here, the first thing we want to do is we want to import Tippy. So let's go here and let's import Tippy from tippy.js. Okay, and then we then want to go to the constructor, and we want to inject the current element which this directive has been applied to. Okay, so private el, short for element, and then element ref, like that. Okay, and this has to be imported up here as well. Okay, so now we have access to the element which this directive has been applied to. So for example, if we go to the to-do item.component.html and we get rid of this template variable, and instead we type in app tooltip, because that's what it's called. If you go here, the selector is app tooltip. And actually, I need to make the T here a capital, so like that. Okay, so now our directive is being applied to this edit button. Okay, so let's save this and let's go back to the tooltip file and let's implement after view init like that, and let's now create the ng after view init method. Okay, and inside here we have to basically do the same thing as we did before in the to-do item component class, which is this. So then let's just cut this and let's paste it in here like that. And if we go here, we can actually just clean all this up. So let's just get rid of this, and let's go here and let's get rid of this because we've now removed that template variable, so that's not going to work. So let's just get rid of that, and let's get rid of this here. Okay, and here we can get rid of the import, and in here we can actually remove the unused all unused declarations like that. Okay, save that now, and let's go back to the tooltip directive file, and here we can change this to this .el.native element like that, and here we can actually name this lref because that's an element reference. So let's just copy that and paste that there. Okay, so let's save that now and let's see what happens. Let's go back to the application and let's hover over the edit button, and we still get the tooltip. Great, so now we have a directive which is successfully adding a tooltip to our edit button. That's great. But now we want to actually make this content dynamic. So for example, we want this to be edit to do for the edit button and delete to do for the delete button, and whatever text we want to use for any other button, right? So let's actually create an input for this directive. So let's use @input. And here we want to call this tooltip content, and this will be a string like that. Okay, so here we can actually now do this .tooltip content like that. Okay, so let's save that now, and let's go back to the application, and let's hover over the edit button, and now we see a blank tooltip. So that isn't good. Okay, so let's go back to our code, and the reason that this is happening is because we aren't passing in the tooltip content. So let's go to the to-do item.component.html. So here we could now pass in the tooltip content by doing tooltip content is equal to and then test. So we could do that, and here we're using property binding, but we aren't using the square bracket notation like that, as this would now be expecting a expression, and we aren't passing in an expression, we want to pass in a string. So here we could actually pass in a string like this. So with single quotes we could pass in a string and type in test and save that. And now if we go here and go here, then it works. We see test, so that's awesome. So we could do that, but a shorthand of doing this is to not use these square brackets and instead just pass in a string. Okay, so let's just pass in a test like that. Let's save that. Let's go back to the application, go here, and now we still see test. Awesome. So now we know that the tooltip content input is working. So here we could type in anything. So we could type in testing 1, 2, 3. We could save that, go back to our application. Okay, and there it is. Okay, so it is working. That's very good. But what I would like to do is I would like to change it so that we haven't got to type in another attribute thing here. I'd rather just put it on this app tooltip. So let's go back to the tooltip file, and here we can actually type in an alias, right? So this is the alias of what we will be binding to. Okay, so here we can actually set this to the same exact thing as our selector. Okay, so let's just copy this and paste it in there, And now Angular will be expecting that we set the string onto this. Okay, so if we save this now and go back to our application, this should be empty. Okay, so it's now empty, and that's because we changed the selector for the input, right? So now we're using this alias. So if we go to the to-do item.component.html and we get rid of this tooltip content, and we now go to the app tooltip, and we can now set this equal to testing. Okay, let's save this and let's go back to our application and try that. And there we go, so it's working. Great. So that's pretty cool. That's really cool. All right, so now let's go back to our application. Okay, and now I would like to just try and try something out. Let's set this equal to a expression. All right, just to test out this Angular directive that we've created. So let's go to the component class for the to-do item, and I would like to create a test string. So let's just call this test, and it'll be of type string, and I'd like to set this to default value. Okay, and if I now save this and I go back to the to-do item template and I set this equal to test. Okay, let's save this, go back to our application, and it says test, right? And that's because we are using the property binding without the square brackets. So now let's add square brackets, and now Angular is expecting a expression or a variable from our component class, and now we have test here, so that should work, and it should show the test value, which is this string here. So let's save this and let's go back to our application, and let's go here, and now we see default value. Awesome. But one thing I want to test out is I want to test out if this Angular directive that we've created is able to be flexible on when the data is set. So for example, if we were using a HTTP request to retrieve this data, it will take some time, right? So let's go to the component class and let's go to ng-onInit, and let's use a set timeout to simulate a short time, and let's say 1000 milliseconds. Okay, so inside here we can now do this.test is equal to new value. Okay, so let's save this now and let's go back to our application and let's try this. Alright, so it's still the default value. Let's try that again, and it's still the default value. Let's try that again. It's still the default value. Alright, so it hasn't actually updated. So that isn't very good because this could be retrieved from HTTP requests, which would take some time, or it may just change in general, right? We may want this tooltip to change in the future, all right? So let's go back to the code, and we have to make the Angular directive a bit more flexible. So let's go here, and let's go up here, and let's implement on changes, okay? Let's do that, and then let's go here, and let's implement, and then let's create the method ng-onChanges, okay? And this takes in a changes parameter, and it's of type simple changes. Okay, so let's go inside here, and in here let's do an if statement that checks if changes, and then let's look at the property app tooltip. Let's see if this has changed. Okay, so here we can say that the content has changed. Input content has changed, right? Alright, so inside here we have to actually update the tooltip. So let's create a new method here called update tooltip content. And actually what we have to do is we actually should store this instance of Tippy here. So let's create a new property. Okay, let's call it Tippy instance, and it'll be of type any, like that. And then here let's do this.tippy instance is equal to, and then this code here. Okay, so now we have access to the actual instance of the tooltip. Okay, so if we go down here, we can do if this.tippy instance, then we can do this dot tippy instance dot set content, and then pass in the tooltip content. This one here, right? So let's just pass that in there. This dot tooltip content, like that. Okay. So now up here we can call update tooltip content. This dot update tooltip content. Okay. Cool. So let's save that now, and let's go back to our application, and let's see if it works. So let's go here and here. Okay, and here it has the default value. Let's go out of it, and let's go back inside, and it still has the default value. So something's not working. Let's go back to the code. Let's console log here, and let's console log here as well. Let's save that. Let's go back here. Okay, so it has actually called ng on changes, I think. Let's go back to the code, and let's go to the to-do item component. Let's actually increase this to about 2.5 seconds. Let's save that, go back here. Okay, yeah, so it is being called there. All right, so let's go back to the code, and let's go to the tooltip directive, and it isn't being called here though, so maybe this is wrong. And it might actually not be the alias, but it might actually just be this tooltip content. So let's just put that in there. Let's save that, and let's go back to our application. Okay, let's try that. And there we go. So now we see the new value. Awesome. That's really, really cool. All right, let's actually reload the page, and let's see. So here we have the default value. Great. And now it's changed to the new value. Awesome. Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, so let's go back to the code, and let's clean things up. Let's go here, and let's get rid of this console log, and let's get rid of this console log. Okay, cool. So that's working really nicely. Yeah, okay, cool. So let's save this now. And our tooltip directive seems to be finished. Let's now go back to the application. Okay, cool. All right, let's actually go back to the code, and let's go to the to-do item.component.html, and let's not use this test property. Let's go to the component class for this to-do item, and let's get rid of all of this code. We don't need it anymore. And let's get rid of this test string. We don't need that. Okay, and let's now go to the template for the to-do item, and let's get rid of these square brackets, and let's just pass in a string, which will be edit to do. Okay, and let's now go to the delete button, and let's do the same thing. Let's just grab this, paste that in there, and change this to delete to do. Okay, let's save that, and let's go back to the application, and let's test this out. Awesome, cool, so that's working pretty nicely. One more thing we could do is we could implement a singleton. And if we go to the website here for the tooltip library, we can see if we go down here, we see that here we can have a singleton, which looks like this. Actually, that is the non-singleton. The singleton is here. And let's look at this one actually, which is the one that has the transition. Okay. All right, so let's try and implement that in our application. So if we actually go to, I think it's plugins, or is it the add-ons? I think it's add-ons actually. Yeah, okay, so let's go here and let's look at how to use it. So here, it's basically just using the create singleton, which is an add-on function, as it says here. So yeah, so we use the create singleton function, and we pass in an array of instances, and then we pass in the options as well. Okay, so the way that we're going to implement this is we're going to create a new directive, which will be called the tooltip singleton directive, and it will search for child elements which have the normal tooltip directive. Okay, so let's go back to our code, and let's go to the terminal, and let's generate a new directive. ng generate directive, And this time, let's make sure we put this into the shared folder. So shared slash, and then the name of the directive, which will be tooltip singleton. Okay, and then press enter. Okay, and once that's been created, we can now go to the shared folder, and we see it here, this one here. Okay, cool. So first of all, let's set up how we're going to use this. So let's go to the to-do item component, and let's go to the parent of these to-do control buttons. All right, so let's go to the to-do controls box, and let's add the app tooltip singleton here. Okay, so that is the selector for this here. Okay, so let's save that, and let's go back to the tooltip singleton directive. And then the first thing we should do is we should import the create singleton function. Create singleton function from, and then type in tippy.js. Okay, and the next thing we should do is we should try and find a way to search for all of the children elements which have the tooltip directive, the regular tooltip directive. Okay, so the way that we can do this in Angular is by using the @contentChildren decorator. Okay, and then inside here we have to pass in the directive. So tooltip directive. Okay, so that's the normal one that we created before, this one here. And then we need to pass in some options, and we're going to say descendants is true. Okay, and then inside here we will set this property name as elements with tooltips, and it will be of type query list, and then it will be of type tooltip directive, like that. Okay, so let's actually make this a bit neater. We can actually put this onto 2 separate lines, I think. So let's do that. And let's just format the document. Okay, cool. And this query list has to be imported up here, as well as the content children. Okay. All right, so the next thing we can do is we can now implement the after view init lifecycle hook. After view init. Okay, and now we can go down here and create the ng after view init method, and then inside here we want to actually just console log the elements with tooltips so that we can see what's going on. So let's save this and let's go back to our application, and here we can see in the console that we have 2 query lists. Great, so let's go to the first one. Okay, so here we can see that we have these results, and it's found 2 elements which have the tooltip directive. Awesome, so that's exactly right because there's 2 of these control buttons. Alright, cool, so let's go back to the code. Okay, and we can get rid of that. Alright, okay, so now we need to convert these to an array of Tippy instances. And that shouldn't be too hard because we have access to the Tippy instance in the tooltip directive. Here we have this Tippy instance here, which we can make public. Okay, so let's do that. So let's just save that now, and let's go back to the tooltip singleton directive. So here we have an array of tooltip directives. Okay, so to convert that into an array of tooltip instances, we have to map through that array, and we can then just return the Tippy instance. Okay, so first of all, let's create a new method here called getTippyInstances. Okay, and inside here we want to return this dot elements with tooltips dot toArray, and then here we can do dot map. So let's just format this a little bit. So let's just do dot toArray dot map. Okay, and then here we have a callback. So this callback will get the value. Okay, so then it's a tooltip directive because here we have an array of tooltip directives. So every value in the callback function will be a single tooltip directive. So let's just call this T, like that. Okay, and then inside here we have to return a value that we want to be inside the final array, right? So as we need an array of Tippy instances, we just need to return t dot and then the Tippy instance, like that. Okay, so that should now work. Let's save that. Okay, and let's go up here to the ng after view init method, and inside here we can do create singleton, and this requires an array of Tippy instances. Okay, so let's just pass in this dot get Tippy instances, like that. Let's save that now, and let's go back to our application. Let's go here, and let's go in between these. And I do think it's working because it's straight away moving onto this one here and not fading out like it was before when we were moving in between them. Okay, so I think it's working. But now let's try and add the transition to them. All right, so let's go here and let's pass in some options. Okay, let's pass in the optional props, and let's set the move transition to transform 0.2 seconds ease out. Let's save that now, and let's go back to our application. And if you go here, and now they're transitioning. Awesome. Awesome, so that's pretty cool. Great. Alright, so that's pretty cool. One thing I want to do is I want to add a small delay. So let's go here and let's set the delay to 200 milliseconds. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to our application, and let's go here, and now it waits 200 milliseconds before showing the tooltip. Awesome. However, there's also the same delay when hiding the tooltip, so it still waits 200 milliseconds to hide it. And we can see this more clearly if we change this to, let's say, 1000 milliseconds, and go back to the application. Okay, and then we then leave it, and then it waits 1 second to fade out. All right, so let's not do that. And the way that we can fix this is by passing in an array. All right, so the so here we can see an error, and it's because it's expecting an array with 2 values, and that's because the entry delay and exit delay. So we want a 1 second entry delay and no exit delay. Okay, so let's just put 0 there, and let's save that, and let's go back to our application. Okay, so it still waits 1 second, but then it fades out straight away. Awesome, cool. All right, so let's go back here, and let's just change this to maybe 400. Okay, so let's save that now, and let's go back to our application, and let's try this. All right, so I think we could make this a little bit faster, so maybe about 200. Okay, let's put that to 200 and go back here. Cool. All right, so that's pretty cool. Cool. All right, so that's pretty nice. Yeah, cool. All right, so let's go back to the code, and let's go here and let's clean things up a bit. So, all right, so let's just get rid of this new line we don't need. And actually, we could actually clean this up by using the shorthand notation. So first of all, we haven't got to use these brackets here, okay, as there's only one parameter here. There is no need for the brackets. And then also, as we have a one-line callback function, and it's returning something, we can just get rid of these curly brackets, and get rid of this one, and we can put that here, but the return isn't valid because it's implicitly returned. So this value here is now implicitly returned. So that is now exactly the same as the code we had before, but it's just a bit neater. It's all in one line here. Okay, cool. All right, so save that, and let's go back to the application, and it should still work. Yep, still works. Cool. All right, so let's go back to the code, and the last thing that we have to do here is we have to subscribe to the changes on the elements with tooltips query list, and whenever there's changes, we can then set the content of the singleton to make sure that this singleton is always kept up to date. Okay, so let's go here, and first of all, we actually have to create a new property. Let's go here and let's create a new property called singleton instance, and let's just set the type as any. Okay, and then here we can do this dot singleton instance is equal to create singleton. Okay, so then this will return a singleton instance, so we can just set that to the singleton instance property. Okay, and then we can go down here, and here we can do this dot elements with tooltips dot changes, and this, as we can see here, is an observable. So let's subscribe to that. Okay, and here's the callback function for this observable. Okay, so here we can now do this dot singleton instance dot set instances, and then here we can pass in the new instances, which we can get by just calling this dot get tippy instances, like that. Okay, so let's save that now, and let's go back to the application, and let's just confirm things are working. Okay, cool. Alright, so this bit of new code that we have added here won't really make a difference in this application in its current state, but if we were to expand this application and for some reason the elements with tooltips would change, this query list would change, then this just makes sure that the singleton instance is always up to date with the correct instances. Okay, so that's all good, and I think that's pretty much finished. Alright, so let's close this, and let's close this. And yeah, so here we have the app tooltip singleton, that's working properly. And yeah, I think everything's pretty much finished. So let's go and look at the application. Let's close this. Alright, so, okay. And one thing I can mention here is that we could actually get rid of this stuff here. We could actually remove this as our application is now fully functional. So we could just get rid of these. I'm just going to comment them out. So I'm going to go here and just comment these out, save that, go back to our application, and now there's no to-dos. And then we could go here and we could try and enter a new to-do. And here we go. We have a new to-do. We can go here and we can change this, changed, and click save. And now that's changed. That's cool. Let's complete that. Let's try and add another one, another to-do. Let's click add. Cool. All right, things are looking pretty good. And let's try and delete this one. Cool. Oh yeah, and let's just try and create quite a few. Okay, and here we can see that it's stuck to the top. That's all working nicely. Cool. Alright, so I think we're pretty much finished for this application. Yeah. Alright, so that's the end of this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, especially if you've watched this far. It's really incredible that you've watched such a long tutorial. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I really hope you enjoyed it. And please let me know what you thought of this video down below in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video.